The weak shall inherit nothing but dust and shame. That's what Elder Moira had whispered to Ember on the day of her first shift, her wrinkled hand cold against Ember's fevered brow. Accept your place, child, and the pack will protect you. But Ember would learn that acceptance was just another word for surrender, and protection was a privilege reserved for those the pack deemed worthy. When you were born an Omega, the lowest of the low, the wolf too weak to even produce a proper scent, you learned that the exterior, the strength, the rank would always matter more than the heart beating beneath your ribs. You learned that mercy was a myth, and that when the wolves closed in for execution, no one would hear your final prayer. Ember had always known she was different. While other wolves emerged from their first transformation with the proud scent of pine and earth, of wild honey and storm scents that announced their rank, their power, their place in the hierarchy, Ember had emerged with nothing. No scent, no rank. Just a small gray wolf with eyes too large and a body too frail. Broken, they called her. Cursed, others whispered. Her own mother had looked away the day Ember shifted, shame burning in her eyes brighter than any pride. But tonight, kneeling in the execution circle with silver chains biting into her wrists and the pack's judgment pressing down like a physical weight, Ember understood the cruelest truth of all. She had never been broken. She had been inconvenient. And inconvenient wolves didn't get mercy. They got eliminated. The wolves circled closer, their eyes gleaming with hunger and righteous fury in the moonlight. Ember could smell their anticipation, their bloodlust, their certainty. They had found her guilty. Guilty of existing. Guilty of weakness. Guilty of the one unforgivable sin being Omega in a pack that worshipped strength above all else. She closed her eyes and waited for the end. And then silence. Not the silence of death, but something deeper. Something that made every wolf in the circle freeze mid-step, their hackles rising not in aggression but in primal instinctive fear. Ember opened her eyes and saw him. The Alpha King stood at the edge of the circle, a figure carved from shadow and moonlight. His presence so overwhelming that the very air seemed to bend around him. He hadn't made a sound, hadn't needed to. Power radiated from him like heat from a forge, and every wolf in the clearing, even the elders, even the beta enforcers, dropped their eyes in submission. Everyone except Ember. She couldn't look away. His eyes met hers across the distance, and in that moment, Ember felt something shift inside her chest. Something ancient and undeniable. Something that whispered one impossible word: mine. The Alpha King tilted his head, studying her with an intensity that should have terrified her. But Ember had already knelt for her execution. She had already accepted death. What was one more impossibility in a life built on them? When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, controlled, the kind of quiet that made mountains tremble. Release her. Chapter 1, The Broken Omega. Ember's story had begun 23 years ago, in the shadow of the Silver Pine Mountains, where the Moon Shadow Pack had ruled for centuries. She was born during a blood moon and omen, the elders said, though they couldn't agree whether it was good or bad. Her mother, Alara, had been a mid-ranking wolf, respectable enough. Her father had died in a border skirmish before Ember took her first breath. She'll be strong, Alara had promised the pack, cradling the infant Ember against her chest. She'll make us proud. But pride, Ember learned, was earned through power. And power was something she would never possess. Her childhood had been ordinary enough, running through the forests with other pups, learning to hunt, to fight, to survive. She'd had friends then. Kiera, with her bright laugh and quick wit. Dorian, who'd shared his kills when Embers were too small. Even Reese, the future Beta's son, had trained alongside her without complaint. Everything changed the night of her first shift. She was 16. The entire pack had gathered in the ceremonial grounds, a clearing ringed by ancient stones that hummed with old magic. One by one, the young wolves had shifted for the first time, their human forms melting into fur and fang as the full moon reached its apex. Kiera had emerged as a beautiful russet wolf, her alpha potential clear in every line of her body. The pack had howled their approval. Dorian had shifted into a massive gray beast, his beta strength undeniable. More howls of celebration. Then it was Ember's turn. She'd felt the change coming, the fire in her veins, The way her bones began to crack and reform. Pain, blinding, excruciating pain, and then nothing. No surge of power. No overwhelming instinct. Just a small, gray wolf that barely reached the shoulders of the others. And no scent. Every wolf had a scent. It was how the pack recognized rank, compatibility, strength. Alphas smelled of thunder and iron. Betas of rich earth and smoke. Even omegas, the lowest rank, carried the sweet scent of wildflowers or honey, marking them as caretakers, nurturers, the heart of the pack. Ember smelled of nothing. Elder Moira had approached, her shifted form slowly, her ancient nose twitching as she searched for any trace of scent. The silence stretched. The pack waited. Finally, Moira had spoken, her voice carrying across the clearing. No rank, no scent. The moon has rejected this one. The howls that followed weren't celebration. They were mourning. Ember had looked to her mother then, desperate for comfort, for reassurance. But Alara had turned away, her shoulders hunched with shame. That night, Ember learned what it meant to be truly alone. The years that followed were a study in survival. Without a rank, Ember existed in a strange limbo. She wasn't cast out. The pack needed every wolf for labor, for numbers, but she wasn't truly part of them either. She was assigned the worst tasks, cleaning the pack's waste, preparing the dead for burial, mending torn clothing and broken tools. She lived in a small hovel at the edge of the territory, far from the communal dens where families gathered and laughed and loved. She ate last, if there was anything left. She spoke only when spoken to, and even then, her words were often ignored. Kiera, her childhood friend, had become one of the pack's most promising young alphas. She passed Ember in the village sometimes, her eyes sliding past as if Ember were invisible. Dorian had taken a mate, a strong beta female, and started a family. He never acknowledged their shared childhood, their old friendship. Only Reese remained, complicated. Reese had become the pack's beta heir, second only to Alpha Garrett in power and authority. He was everything an unmated wolf should want: strong, handsome, respected, and for reasons Ember had never understood, he'd continued to notice her. "You don't have to live like this," he'd told her once, finding her scrubbing blood from the butchering stones. I could speak to my father. Find you better work." Ember had looked up at him, at the pity in his eyes, and felt something shrivel inside her chest. "I don't need your charity, Reese. It's not charity. It's..." He'd hesitated, something unreadable flickering across his face. "You deserve better." But he'd never actually done anything, never challenged his father, never stood up to the pack. His kindness was all words and longing glances, nothing more. Still, Ember had been foolish enough to hope. Foolish enough to imagine that maybe, somehow, she could matter to someone. That hope died 3 months ago. The night of the spring gathering, the pack had assembled to celebrate the season's first hunt and to honor those who'd pledged their matings. It was a night of joy, of howling and dancing beneath the stars. Ember had attended only because her absence would have been noted, marked as disrespect. She'd stood at the back of the crowd, trying to be invisible. Then Reese had stepped forward, and the entire pack had fallen silent. "I've chosen my mate," he'd announced, his voice strong and clear. Ember's heart had stuttered. She'd caught his eye once that evening, had seen something that looked almost like regret. "Kiera Nightshade," Reese continued, "Alpha-born, strong, worthy. She has agreed to stand at my side." The pack had erupted in celebration. Kiera had stepped forward, radiant and proud, and Reese had pulled her into his arms. Ember had felt something crack inside her chest. She'd turned to leave, to disappear into the shadows, but a hand had caught her arm. Kiera. Her old friend. Her childhood companion. "Stay," Kiera had said, her smile sharp as broken glass. "You should witness what happens when wolves actually matter." "Kiera, did you think he'd choose you?" Kiera's voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for Ember's ears. "A broken omega, with no scent, no rank, no worth. You're delusional, Ember. You always have been." The words had cut deeper than any claw, but worse was what came next. Reese had approached, his arms still around Kiera, and he'd looked at Ember with something that might have been apology, or might have been relief. You understand, don't you? He'd said quietly. I have responsibilities. The pack needs strong leadership. I can't. He gestured helplessly. I can't choose weakness. Ember had understood perfectly. She'd fled then, ignoring the laughter that followed her, the whispers of pathetic and delusional Omega. She'd run to her hovel and hadn't emerged for 3 days. That should have been the end of it. Humiliation, yes. Heartbreak, certainly. But survivable. Then the children went missing. It started with little Mira, a 5-year-old pup from one of the mid-ranking families. She'd been playing near the eastern border and simply vanished. The pack searched for days, finding nothing but her torn clothing near the river. Then 2 more children disappeared within a week. Both from families that had recently risen in rank, both taken near the territory's edges. The pack grew paranoid. Patrols doubled. Parents kept their children close, and the elders began to mutter about curses, about omens, about how the blood moon that had heralded Ember's birth had marked the pack for tragedy. It started when she came of age. Elder Moira had said during a pack meeting, Ember had been forbidden to attend. But she'd heard anyway, lurking in the shadows. The moon rejected her. Perhaps she's brought darkness upon us all. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. Then, 2 weeks ago, Kiera and Reese's mating ceremony had been interrupted. Alpha Garrett himself had stood before the gathered pack, his face grave. We've found evidence, he'd announced. Evidence that these disappearances aren't random attacks. Someone in the pack is working with the rogues beyond our borders. Someone is betraying us. The pack had erupted in fury and fear. And we believe, Garrett continued, his eyes sweeping the crowd, that we know who. His gaze had landed on Ember, the broken Omega, the one the moon rejected, the one who lives apart, who skulks in shadows, who has always been wrong. Ember had frozen, her blood turning to ice. No, she'd whispered. No, I would never. But no one had listened. They'd found proof in her hovel, a torn piece of clothing belonging to one of the missing children, tucked beneath her sleeping mat. A map with the territory's weak points marked. A silver dagger, the kind rogues favored. All planted. All lies. But truth didn't matter when the pack wanted someone to blame. They'd dragged her to the execution circle that very night, chained her in silver, and called for her death. And Ember, exhausted from years of rejection, from fighting to exist in a pack that didn't want her, had knelt without protest. She was ready for it to end, until the Alpha King appeared. Now, as the silver chains fell from her wrists and clattered to the ground, Ember looked up at the figure who'd commanded her release with a single word. The Alpha King Cassian Shadowborn, ruler of all packs in the Northern Territories, stood with the kind of stillness that suggested violence barely leashed. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his dark hair silver-touched at the temples despite his youth. Scars marked his exposed forearms, badges of battles won, but it was his eyes that held her. Pale gold, like winter sunlight, burning with an intensity that made her want to look away. She couldn't. Alpha Garrett stepped forward, his submission evident in every line of his body. Your Majesty, we didn't expect this as pack justice. The Omega betrayed us. She worked with rogues, helped them take our children. Proof? Cassian's voice was soft, deadly. We found evidence in her dwelling. I asked for proof, not circumstance, not convenience. Cassian's gaze never left Ember. Evidence that she, specifically, committed these crimes. Garrett faltered. The items we found could have been planted by anyone with access to her dwelling. Cassian tilted his head slightly. Tell me, Alpha Garrett, does this Omega have the ability to challenge your guards? To overpower your patrols? To coordinate with rogues, who would sooner kill a lone wolf than work with one? Silence. She's weak. Elder Moira spoke up, her voice quavering. Perhaps that's why they used her. She was easy to manipulate. Then she's a victim, not a perpetrator. Cassian finally looked away from Ember, his gaze sweeping across the assembled pack. You were about to execute one of your own based on planted evidence and fear. Is this how the Moon Shadow Pack dispenses justice? No one answered. Cassian stepped into the circle, and Ember felt her breath catch as he approached. He moved like a predator, all controlled power and lethal grace. When he stopped in front of her, so close she could feel the heat radiating from his body, she had to crane her neck to meet his eyes. "Stand," he said quietly. Ember's legs trembled as she obeyed, her body weak from days without food and the silver's burn. She swayed slightly, and his hand shot out, steadying her with a grip that was surprisingly gentle. The moment his skin touched hers, Ember felt it again, that shift, that pull, that impossible recognition. "Mate." The word blazed through her mind like wildfire, and she saw Cassian's eyes widen fractionally. He'd felt it too, but that was impossible. Alpha Kings didn't mate with broken Omegas. The universe didn't work that way. Cassian released her slowly, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to Garrett. "This Omega is under my protection now. Any who touch her answer to me." His voice carried across the clearing, a promise and a threat. "I'll investigate these disappearances myself, and if I find that this pack has participated in a false accusation to cover the real culprit." He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Garrett bowed deeply, fear stark in his eyes. "Of course, Your Majesty. Whatever you require." Cassian looked at Ember one more time, something complex flickering in those golden eyes. "Come. You're leaving this place." Ember wanted to argue, to ask why, to demand answers, but her voice had abandoned her, so she simply nodded and followed the Alpha King into the darkness, away from the pack that had condemned her, toward an uncertain future that terrified her more than death ever had. Behind them, the pack watched in stunned silence as their rejected Omega walked away with the most powerful Alpha in the territories. And in the shadows at the edge of the clearing, someone smiled. The game had just begun. Chapter 2. The Alpha King's Mercy. The Alpha King's camp was a mile north of Moonshadow territory, hidden in a grove of ancient oaks that seemed to bend toward Cassian in reverence. Ember walked behind him in silence, her bare feet bleeding from the rocky path, her body still trembling from the silver's poison. She wanted to ask where they were going, what he wanted with her, why he'd saved her life, but every time she opened her mouth, the words died in her throat. Alpha Kings didn't save broken Omegas, they didn't even acknowledge them. Yet here she was, following Cassian Shadowborn through the darkness like a ghost trailing its own death. The camp materialized out of the shadows. A dozen tents arranged in a precise circle. Guards posted at intervals. A central fire burning low and steady. Wolves moved through the space with military efficiency, each one radiating the kind of power that made Ember's wolf whimper and curl into itself. These were the King's Guard. Elite warriors chosen from every pack in the Northern Territories. Alphas and betas so strong they could tear through rogues like paper. And Ember, who could barely hold her shifted form for more than an hour, was standing among them. One of the guards, a massive beta, with a scar running down his jaw, approached Cassian immediately. "Your Majesty, we heard the commotion. Should we?" His eyes landed on Ember, and something like confusion flickered across his face. "Who is this?" "A guest," Cassian said simply. "Thorn, prepare the medical tent. She's been poisoned with silver." Thorn's eyebrows rose fractionally, but he bowed. "At once, Your Majesty." As the beta strode away, Cassian turned to Ember. In the firelight, his features were even more striking. Sharp cheekbones, a strong jaw, lips pressed into a firm line. But it was still his eyes that captured her. Those burning gold eyes that seemed to see straight through her skin to the broken parts underneath. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "No one will harm you." Ember finally found her voice, though it came out hoarse and raw. "Why? Why what? Why save me? Why bring me here? Why?" She gestured helplessly at the camp, at herself, at the impossibility of this entire situation. "I'm nothing. No rank, no scent, no worth. You're the Alpha King. This doesn't make sense." Cassian studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he said, "When I arrived at that clearing and saw you kneeling in that circle, do you know what I felt?" Ember shook her head. "Rage." The word was soft, but it carried the weight of thunder. "Not at you. At them. At a pack so corrupted by hierarchy that they would execute one of their own without proper evidence. Without trial, without mercy. He took a step closer, and Ember's breath caught. You asked why I saved you. The better question is, why did no one else? The words hit her like a physical blow. All those years of isolation, of degradation, of being treated as less than nothing, and this stranger, this king, was the first person to ask why. Ember felt something hot and painful rise in her throat. She forced it down. The medical tent is ready, Your Majesty, Thorn called from across the camp. Cassian nodded, then looked back at Ember. Go. Let them treat your wounds. We'll talk more in the morning. I don't understand what's happening, Ember whispered. Neither do I, Cassian admitted, and for just a moment, she saw something vulnerable flicker across his face. But we'll figure it out together. He turned and walked toward the largest tent, leaving Ember standing by the fire, more confused than ever. The medical tent smelled of herbs and clean linen scents so foreign to Ember that she almost bolted. A young woman with kind eyes and the bearing of a high-ranking beta gestured to a cot. Sit, please. I'm Lyra, the king's healer. Her voice was gentle, professional. I need to treat the silver burns on your wrists. Ember sat stiffly, holding out her arms. The skin where the chains had rested was raw and blistered, the silver having burned away flesh down to the muscle in some places. It should have hurt more. Maybe she was just too numb to feel it anymore. Lyra worked in silence, applying salves that smelled of moonflower and wintergreen. The relief was immediate, a cooling sensation that spread through Ember's arms and dulled the throbbing pain. You're lucky, Lyra said quietly. Another hour in those chains and the damage would have been permanent. You might have lost use of your hands entirely. Lucky, Ember repeated hollowly. Yes, that's exactly what I am. Lyra paused, meeting Ember's eyes. The king doesn't save people without reason. Whatever brought you here, whatever happened back there, it means something. It means I'm a convenient pawn in whatever game he's playing. You don't know him at all, do you? Lyra smiled slightly. Cassian Shadowborn doesn't play games. He doesn't use people as pawns. If he brought you here, it's because he believes you deserve protection. That's not nothing. Ember wanted to argue, to point out that kings always had agendas, that power was always about leverage. But she was so tired of fighting, tired of surviving, tired of trying to understand why the world had decided she didn't deserve to exist. Rest, Lyra said, finishing the last bandage. You're safe here. Whatever happens next, at least you're not facing execution. It was a low bar, but Ember supposed it was something. She lay back on the cot, her body sinking into the softness of real bedding, another luxury she hadn't experienced in years. Around her, the camp settled into the quiet rhythms of night, guards changing shifts, the fire crackling, distant conversations in hushed tones. For the first time in longer than she could remember, Ember felt something almost like peace. It terrified her. She woke to shouting. Ember bolted upright, her heart hammering, her wolf instincts screaming danger. Dawnlight filtered through the tent's opening, painting everything in shades of gray and gold. Outside, voices rose in argument. Absolutely absurd. You can't possibly think. I don't think, Thorn. I know. That was Cassian's voice, cold and commanding. And I don't need to justify my decisions to you, or anyone else. Your Majesty, please, be reasonable. She's an Omega. Not just any Omega, a broken one. No rank, no scent, no... Enough. The single word cracked like a whip. Question me again, and you'll find yourself stripped of rank and sent back to your pack in disgrace. Silence. Ember crept to the tent's opening and peered out. Cassian stood in the center of the camp, his posture rigid with barely contained fury. Thorn knelt before him, head bowed, shoulders tight with tension. The other guards watched from a distance, their expressions carefully neutral. She stays, Cassian continued, his voice dropping to something almost dangerous. She is under my protection. Anyone who disagrees is welcome to challenge me directly. No one moved. Cassian's gaze swept across the camp, landing briefly on the medical tent where Ember hid. For a moment, their eyes met, and Ember saw something in his expression that made her chest tighten determination, mixed with something that looked almost like desperation. Then he turned and strode toward his tent, dismissing the entire camp with his silence. Thorn rose slowly, his jaw clenched, and stalked off in the opposite direction. Ember withdrew into the medical tent, her mind racing. They didn't want her here. Of course they didn't. She was an outsider, weak, a liability, and Cassian was defending her anyway, risking his own authority to what? What did he want from her? The mate bond whispered its answer. Everything. But that was impossible. Mate bonds required mutual recognition, mutual desire, mutual worth. Ember had none of those things. You're awake. Lyra entered the tent carrying a tray of food, real food, not scraps. Bread, cheese, dried meat, fresh water. Good. You need to eat. Build your strength back. Ember stared at the tray like it might bite her. This is too much. It's a normal breakfast. Lyra set the tray down on a small table. Eat. King's orders. Everyone hates that I'm here, Ember said quietly. I heard them. Thorn is protective of the king. He doesn't understand why Cassian would risk political complications for an unknown Omega. Lyra sat down across from her. But that doesn't mean he's right. Eat, please. Ember picked up a piece of bread, her hands trembling slightly. The first bite was heaven soft, warm, real. She had to force herself not to devour it all at once, to eat slowly, with dignity. Why is he doing this? Ember asked between bites. Really? There has to be a reason. Lyra hesitated, then leaned forward. Can I ask you something personal? Ember nodded. When you were in that execution circle, when the king arrived, did you feel anything? Anything unusual? The mate bond flared in Ember's chest, warm and insistent. She looked away. I don't know what you mean. I think you do. Lyra's voice was gentle. I've served Cassian for 5 years. I've never seen him act like this. Never seen him so unsettled. And the way he looks at you, he pities me, Ember interrupted. That's all. Cassian Shadowborn doesn't do pity. Before Ember could respond, the tent flap opened, and Cassian himself entered. Lyra immediately bowed and excused herself, leaving Ember alone with the Alpha King in the small, suddenly claustrophobic space. Cassian looked tired, she realized. Shadows darkened the skin beneath his eyes, and tension lined his shoulders. We need to talk, he said. Ember set down her food, her appetite vanishing. About? About what you felt in that clearing, about what I felt. He crossed his arms, leaning against the tent's center post. Don't lie to me. I can hear your heartbeat. I know you felt it too. The mate bond. Ember's hands clenched in her lap. It's not real. Excuse me? It's not real, she repeated, her voice stronger now. Mate bonds don't work like that. They require compatibility, balance, mutual strength. I have nothing to offer you. No rank, no power, no political advantage. It's some kind of mistake. A cosmic joke. Cassian moved closer, crouching down so they were eye level. Do you know how many potential mates I've met in my 30 years? Hundreds. Alphas from every pack, carefully selected for political advantage and genetic strength. I felt nothing for any of them. His golden eyes burned into hers. Then I walk into a clearing and see a broken, bleeding Omega about to be executed, and the bond hits me like lightning. Tell me what mistake could the universe possibly make that profound? Ember's breath caught. You can't want this. You can't want me. I don't know what I want yet, Cassian admitted. But I know what I felt, and I know that letting them kill you would have torn something essential out of my chest. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. The touch sent electricity racing across her skin. You're my mate, Ember. However impossible, however inconvenient, you're mine. And I protect what's mine. Tears burned behind Ember's eyes. She'd spent so long being worthless, being nothing, that having someone claim her, someone like him, felt like a trap. A beautiful, terrible trap. I don't know how to be anyone's mate, she whispered. I don't even know how to be a wolf anymore. Then we'll figure it out together. Cassian stood, offering her his hand, starting with finding out who really took those children and framed you for it. Because someone in that pack wanted you dead, Ember. And I intend to find out why. Ember stared at his outstretched hand, scarred, strong, steady. A hand that could crush her skull or cradle her face with equal ease. A hand that had saved her life. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her hand in his. The bond flared bright and golden between them. And for the first time in her life, Ember felt like she might actually be worth something, even if she didn't understand why. Subscribe if you believe Ember deserves better than this. Because wolves like Ember need an audience that won't abandon them. People who see that strength isn't just about power, but about surviving when the world wants you dead. Drop a comment if Ember's pain is your pain too. Tell her she's not alone in this. Outside the tent, hidden among the trees, a figure watched the Alpha King's camp with cold, calculating eyes. The Omega had survived. That was unexpected, but not insurmountable. If anything, it made the game more interesting. The figure smiled, turned, and disappeared into the forest. Phase 2 could begin. Chapter 3. Shadows and Secrets. The investigation began at dawn. Cassian had assembled his most trusted guards in the command tent, a space dominated by maps, reports, and the lingering scent of strong coffee. Ember stood awkwardly at the edge of the gathering, acutely aware that she was the only Omega in a room full of alphas and high-ranking betas. Thorn stood opposite her, his expression carefully neutral, but his distaste obvious in the rigid set of his shoulders. Beside him was a tall, lean alpha named Dakota, with silver-streaked hair and sharp green eyes. And next to Dakota was a younger beta called Finn, barely past his 20th year but already bearing the scars of a warrior. Let's review what we know, Cassian said, spreading a detailed map of Moonshadow territory across the central table. 3 children have disappeared over the past month. Mira Ashwood, age 5. Twins Jace and Lila Thornhart, age 7. All taken near the eastern border, all from families that recently increased in rank. Pattern suggests targeting, Dakota observed, her voice crisp and analytical. Someone with a grudge against rising families, or someone who wants to destabilize the pack's hierarchy, or someone who knew those families would be distracted by their new status, Finn added, too busy celebrating to notice the danger. The evidence planted in Ember's dwelling was crude, Cassian continued, his finger tracing the border area on the map. A torn piece of Mira's dress. A map with patrol routes marked. A silver dagger of rogue make. He looked up, his golden eyes sweeping across the room. Too crude. Too obvious. Whoever did this wanted Ember blamed quickly, before anyone could investigate properly. Why? Thorn asked, his gaze flicking to Ember with barely concealed suspicion. What makes her so important? She's just an Omega. Killing her would barely register. Exactly, Cassian said softly. She's the perfect scapegoat. Powerless, isolated, already rejected by the pack. Who would question her guilt? Who would defend her? The silence that followed was damning. Ember wrapped her arms around herself, feeling the weight of their judgment, even as Cassian defended her. She wanted to speak up, to contribute something useful. But what did she have to offer? She knew nothing about investigation, about strategy, about the eastern border, she said suddenly, the words escaping before she could stop them. Every eye in the tent turned to her. Cassian raised an eyebrow. What about it? Ember swallowed hard, forcing herself to continue despite the attention. The eastern border. It's where I was assigned to work. Before, I spent months clearing deadfall, maintaining the boundary markers, checking the old silver traps. Why does that matter? Thorn demanded. Because I saw things. Ember stepped closer to the map, her finger hovering over a section of dense forest. Here, there's a cave system that the pack doesn't use anymore. Too unstable, the elders said, but about 2 months ago, I noticed fresh tracks leading into it. Wolf tracks, but strange heavier than they should be, like someone was carrying weight. Cassian leaned forward, his interest sharp and focused. You reported this? Ember laughed bitterly. To who? I was the broken Omega. No one listened to anything I said. I tried to tell one of the border patrols, but they... She stopped, the memory burning. They told me to stop making up stories for attention and get back to work. Dakota exchanged a glance with Cassian. Those caves would be perfect for hiding captives, deep enough that sound wouldn't carry, isolated enough that no one would stumble across them accidentally. It's also exactly where the map found in Ember's hovel pointed to, Finn added, his young face thoughtful. If someone planted that evidence, they might have accidentally given us a real clue. Or they wanted us to find it, Thorn countered. Could be a trap. Then we spring it carefully. Cassian straightened, his command voice sliding into place like armor. Dakota, Finn, you'll scout the caves first. Don't engage. Just observe and report. Thorn, I want you to investigate the families of the missing children. Find out who had access to their routines, their schedules. And you, Your Majesty? Thorn asked. I'm going back to Moonshadow territory. Cassian's jaw tightened. Alpha Garrett and I are going to have a conversation about his pack's investigative methods, or lack thereof. I'm coming with you, Ember said before she could think better of it. The tent went silent. Cassian turned to her slowly. Ember, they tried to kill me, she interrupted, surprised by the steel in her own voice. They convicted me without trial, without evidence, without giving me a chance to defend myself. If there's going to be an investigation, if you're going to confront them, I deserve to be there. It's too dangerous, Cassian said, but his tone suggested he was already reconsidering. I've lived with danger my entire life. This is just more obvious. Ember met his eyes, refusing to look away. Besides, I know that pack. I know how they think, how they operate. I might see things you'd miss. Dakota cleared her throat. She has a point, Your Majesty. An insider's perspective could be valuable. Thorn looked like he wanted to argue, but Cassian raised a hand, silencing him. Fine, the Alpha King said, but you stay close to me. No wandering off, no taking risks. Understood? Ember nodded, trying to ignore the flutter in her chest at his protective tone. Everyone has their assignments, Cassian announced. We move within the hour. These children have been missing long enough. It's time to bring them home. The guards dispersed quickly, leaving Ember alone with Cassian in the command tent. He studied her for a long moment, something complex playing across his features. You didn't have to volunteer for this. You could have stayed here, stayed safe. Safe isn't the same as free, Ember said quietly. And I'm tired of hiding. Cassian's expression softened. You're stronger than you think. You know that, don't you? I don't feel strong. Strength isn't about power, Ember. It's about surviving when everything wants you dead, and still choosing to stand up anyway. He moved closer, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, smell the pine and winter storm scent that marked him as Alpha. You've been strong your entire life. You just never had anyone tell you that before. The mate bond hummed between them, warm and insistent, and Ember felt her wolf stir for the first time in days, not in fear or submission, but in recognition. In longing. Cassian, she whispered, not even sure what she wanted to say. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek with a gentleness that made her chest ache. I know this is complicated. I know you don't trust this. Don't trust me. Probably don't even trust yourself right now. But I need you to know something. What? I'm not going to let anyone hurt you again. Not the pack that rejected you, not whoever framed you, not even your own doubts. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone, the touch sending shivers down her spine. You're mine now, and I protect what's mine. Before Ember could respond, before she could process the fierce possessiveness in his voice, Cassian pulled away and strode toward the tent's exit. Get ready, he called over his shoulder. We leave in 30 minutes. And Ember? Yes? Thank you. For trusting me enough to come forward about those caves. You might have just saved those children's lives. He disappeared through the tent flap, leaving Ember standing alone with her racing heart and the impossible reality that the Alpha King, the most powerful wolf in the territories, had just claimed her as his. And somehow, impossibly, she was starting to believe him. The journey back to Moonshadow territory took 2 hours on foot. Cassian moved through the forest with the fluid grace of a predator, his senses constantly scanning for threats. Ember struggled to keep pace, her weakened body protesting every step, but she refused to slow down, refused to be a burden. They reached the border, just as the sun climbed toward its apex, painting the sky in shades of crystalline blue. A patrol intercepted them immediately. 3 beta wolves who went rigid with shock when they recognized Cassian, then pale with fear when they saw Ember at his side. "Your Majesty," the lead beta stammered, dropping into a bow so deep his forehead nearly touched the ground. We didn't expect Alpha." Garrett wasn't informed. "I don't require permission to enter any territory under my jurisdiction," Cassian said coldly. "Take me to your Alpha, now." The betas scrambled to obey, leading them through the forest toward the pack's central village. Ember felt eyes on her with every step, pack members emerging from their homes and work sites to stare at the broken Omega who'd somehow returned from her execution. Walking beside the Alpha King like an equal, she heard the whispers. How is she alive? The king saved her, why would he do that? Maybe she did work with the rogues. Maybe she seduced him somehow. An Omega seducing an Alpha King? Don't be ridiculous. Each word was a small knife, familiar and sharp. Ember kept her eyes forward, her spine straight, refusing to show weakness. Cassian's hand found hers, lacing their fingers together in a grip that was both gentle and unbreakable. The whispers stopped immediately. They reached Alpha Garrett's lodge, a large wooden structure at the village's heart, and found the Alpha waiting on the front steps, his face carefully composed but his scent betraying his anxiety. "Your Majesty," Garrett said, bowing. "This is unexpected. If you'd sent word, we would have prepared a proper welcome." "I'm not here for welcomes," Cassian interrupted. "I'm here for answers. Starting with why you were so eager to execute an Omega without proper investigation." Garrett's jaw tightened. "With respect, Your Majesty, this is an internal pack matter. It became my matter the moment you decided to act as judge, jury, and executioner." Cassian's voice dropped to something dangerous. 3 children are missing. You found convenient evidence pointing to your most vulnerable member, and rather than investigating further, rather than considering other possibilities, you went straight to execution. Why? The evidence was clear. The evidence was planted, crudely, obviously. Cassian released Ember's hand and took a step toward Garrett, his dominance rolling off him in waves that made every wolf in the vicinity lower their heads in submission. "So I'll ask again, why were you so eager to blame her?" Garrett opened his mouth, closed it, then seemed to deflate slightly. The pack was frightened, angry. They needed someone to blame, someone to punish. The Omega was convenient. Convenient, Ember repeated, her voice shaking with suppressed fury. "You were going to kill me because it was convenient." "You have no rank," Garrett snapped, his composure cracking. "No family to seek vengeance, no allies to cause political complications. Yes, it was convenient, and sometimes, a leader must make difficult choices for the greater good." Cassian moved so fast Ember barely saw it. One moment he was standing beside her. The next, he had Garrett pinned against the lodge wall, his hand around the Alpha's throat. "The greater good," Cassian said softly, "does not include murdering innocents to appease mob mentality. You are Alpha of this pack, Garrett. That means you're supposed to protect all your members. Not just the strong ones, not just the convenient ones. All of them." Garrett wheezed, his face reddening. "Your Majesty, please." Cassian released him with a disgusted sound. "You're lucky I don't strip your title here and now. The only reason you're still Alpha is because this pack needs leadership while we find those children." He turned to Ember. "Show me where those caves are. It's time to end this." Ember nodded, relief and vindication warring in her chest. But as she turned to lead Cassian toward the eastern border, she caught sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Kiera, her former friend, stood near the lodge's side entrance, her expression unreadable. But there was something in her eyes, something that looked almost like guilt, or fear. Before Ember could process it, Kiera vanished back into the lodge. "Ember?" Cassian's voice pulled her attention back. "Are you all right?" "Yes," she lied. "Let's go." But as they headed toward the border, toward the caves that might hold the answers they needed, Ember couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking straight into something far more dangerous than a simple kidnapping. Someone in this pack wanted those children gone. Someone wanted Ember dead. And something told her those two facts were intimately connected. The question was, who and why? Chapter 4. The Cave of Truths. The eastern border was a place of shadows and silence. Ancient trees twisted toward the sky, their branches so thick they blocked out most of the sunlight, leaving the forest floor in perpetual twilight. Ember had spent countless hours here over the years, alone with her thoughts and the ghosts of her failures. Now she walked beside the Alpha King, armed guards flanking them on both sides, and everything felt different. The trees seemed less oppressive, the shadows less suffocating. Or maybe she was just finally tired of being afraid. "How much further?" Cassian asked, his voice low and controlled. "Just beyond that ridge." Ember pointed to a rocky outcropping covered in moss and trailing vines. "The main entrance is hidden behind the rockfall. Most wolves don't even know it exists anymore." Dakota and Finn had already scouted ahead, their reports confirming what Ember had suspected. Fresh tracks, disturbed undergrowth, and the faint scent of terrified young wolves lingering in the air. The children were here, or had been recently. Cassian signaled for the guards to fan out, creating a perimeter. Then he turned to Ember, his golden eyes serious. "I need you to stay here with 2 guards while we—" "No." Ember surprised herself with the firmness of her voice. "I'm coming with you. Ember, those children know me. I used to help in the pack nursery before. Before she'd been deemed too broken, too worthless even for that. Before I was reassigned. If they're scared, if they're hurt, they might respond better to a familiar face than to strange warriors." Cassian studied her for a long moment, and Ember could see the war playing out behind his eyes, the desire to protect her versus the logic of her argument. "She's right," Dakota said quietly, materializing from the shadows. "Children who've been traumatized often shut down around aggressive energy, and Omega's presence might calm them." "Fine," Cassian relented, though his jaw remained tight. "But you stay behind me, and if I tell you to run, you run. No arguments." Ember nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. They approached the cave entrance carefully. The rockfall that concealed it looked natural, the result of some long-ago earthquake or erosion. But up close, Ember could see signs of deliberate arrangement, stones placed just so, creating an opening large enough for a wolf to slip through but small enough to escape casual notice. The scent hit her as soon as they entered. Fear, waste, sickness, and beneath it all, the cloying sweetness of sedative herbs. Someone had been keeping the children drugged. Cassian's growl was low and dangerous, a sound that promised violence to whoever had done this. He shifted partially, his eyes taking on the golden glow of his wolf, his canines lengthening. The cave tunnel descended steeply, the walls pressing close on either side. Ember's breathing quickened as the darkness deepened, but Cassian's presence ahead of her, solid, steady, protective, kept her panic at bay. They emerged into a larger cavern, and Ember's heart broke. 3 small forms huddled in the far corner, chained to the wall with silver-coated links that had burned angry welts into their small wrists and ankles. Mira, the youngest, was unconscious, her breathing shallow and ragged. The twins, Jace and Lila, were awake but glassy-eyed, their gazes unfocused from whatever drugs had been forced into them. "Gods!" Finn breathed, horror stark in his voice. Cassian moved immediately, his partial shift receding as he approached the children with careful, non-threatening movements. "It's all right, you're safe now. We're going to get you out of here." But the twins flinched away, whimpering. "Wait," Ember whispered, stepping forward. She kept her movements slow, her voice soft. "Jace, Lila, it's me, Ember. Remember? I used to tell you stories in the nursery. About the moon goddess and the first wolves." Jace's eyes focused slightly, recognition flickering. "Ember? Yes, sweetheart, I'm here, and these wolves are here to help. They're going to take you home." "Mama?" Lila's voice was small, broken. "Want Mama? I know. We're going to take you to her very soon." Ember knelt beside them, ignoring the burning sensation as her own barely healed wrists brushed against the silver chains. "But first we need to get these off you. Can you be brave for just a little longer?" Dakota produced a set of silver-resistant gloves and began working on the chains, while Lyra, who'd accompanied them specifically for medical support, examined Mira's unconscious form. "She's been heavily sedated," Lyra reported, her voice tight with controlled anger. "And she's dehydrated. malnourished. We need to get her back to camp immediately. Cassian's expression was carved from stone, his fury so palpable it made the air vibrate. But when he spoke, his voice was gentle. Finn, carry Mira. Dakota, help with the twins. We're getting them out of here now. As the guards carefully gathered the children, Ember noticed something that made her blood run cold. On the cave wall, partially hidden by shadows, were scratches, deliberate marks carved into the stone. She moved closer, her wolf-enhanced vision picking out the pattern. Numbers, dates, and names. Not just the 3 missing children's names, but others, a dozen others, spanning back nearly 2 years. Cassian, Ember called, her voice shaking. You need to see this. The Alpha King appeared at her side instantly, his eyes scanning the wall. She watched his expression shift from confusion to horror to an icy, terrifying rage. This isn't the first time, he said quietly. These kidnappings, they've been happening for years, and no one noticed. Or no one cared to investigate. All Omegas and low-ranking pups? Ember read, her finger tracing the names. Children who wouldn't be missed as much. Children whose families didn't have the power to demand answers. Dakota's voice came from behind them, cold as winter. This is systematic, organized. Someone in that pack has been taking children for years and covering it up. But why? Finn asked, his young face pale with shock. What would anyone want with? He stopped, realization dawning. The slave trade. Gods, they're selling them to the rogue networks. Ember's stomach turned. The rogue networks were a dark legend in Wolf Society criminal organizations that trafficked in everything from weapons to territory disputes to people. Omegas especially, valued for their rarity and their inability to fight back effectively. Children were even more valuable, easier to transport, easier to break. We need to get back to Moonshadow territory, Cassian said, his voice deadly calm. Garrett has questions to answer, and if he's involved in this. He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. They made their way back through the tunnel, the rescued children now wrapped in blankets and cradled carefully by the guards. Ember brought up the rear, her mind racing. Someone in the pack was doing this. Someone with enough authority to move freely, to access children without suspicion, to cover their tracks for years. An alpha, or a beta, in a position of power, or Ember's thoughts scattered as they emerged from the cave into fading afternoon light. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of blood and gold. A wolf was waiting for them. Reese stood at the clearing's edge, his expression carefully neutral, but his scent betraying his anxiety. Behind him, 3 other beta wolves, all members of the pack's inner circle. Your Majesty, Reese said, bowing. Alpha Garrett sent us to assist with the children. We heard they'd been found. How convenient, Cassian said coldly, that you arrived just as we were leaving. And how interesting that Garrett knew exactly where to send you. Reese's eyes flicked to Ember, something complicated passing across his face. The pack has been searching these woods for weeks. When your scouts were spotted heading this direction, you assumed we'd need help? Dakota cut in, her voice sharp. Or you assumed you needed to make sure certain evidence didn't make it back to the village. The beta wolves behind Reese shifted nervously, their hands moving toward their weapons. Cassian's growl was low and warning. I wouldn't. My guards outnumber you, outrank you, and are significantly less patient than I am right now. We're not here to fight, Reese said quickly, raising his hands in a placating gesture. We're here to help. Those children are pack. We want them safe just as much as you do. Then you won't mind accompanying us back to your Alpha, so we can all have a conversation about how these kidnappings went unnoticed for 2 years, Cassian said pleasantly. The pleasantness was somehow more terrifying than his anger. Reese paled. 2 years? There's a wall in that cave, covered in names and dates. Children who've been disappearing systematically, while your pack's leadership looked the other way. Or participated. Cassian took a step toward Reese, his dominance radiating like heat. So yes, you're going to accompany us, and you're going to answer every question I ask with complete honesty. Or I'm going to assume you're complicit and act accordingly. Ember watched Reese's face cycle through shock, fear, and finally, resignation. I didn't know, he whispered. I swear on my wolf. I didn't know it had been happening that long. We thought, when the 3 children went missing this month, we thought it was a new threat, not evidence of a long-standing conspiracy. Dakota finished grimly. The journey back to Moonshadow territory was tense and silent. The guards formed a protective circle around the children, while Reese and his betas were clearly under watch, even if they weren't technically prisoners. Ember walked beside Cassian, her mind still reeling from everything they'd discovered. 2 years of kidnappings, dozens of children, and the pack leadership had either been oblivious or complicit. You're thinking loudly, Cassian murmured, his hand finding hers again. I don't understand. How could they not notice? How could no one care that children were disappearing? Because they were the wrong children, Cassian said, his voice heavy with disgust. Low-ranking, powerless, the kind of wolves that packs like this view as expendable. His grip on her hand tightened, the same way they viewed you. Ember's throat tightened. If you hadn't come. If you hadn't stopped my execution. But I did. And now we're going to make sure no one else is treated as expendable ever again. They reached the village, as night fell completely. The pack had gathered in the central square, word having spread that the children had been found. Parents pushed forward, desperate and hopeful, their cries of relief when they saw their pups alive echoing through the darkness. But beneath the relief was something else, something darker, fear, and the dawning realization that something was very, very wrong in Moonshadow Pack. Alpha Garrett stood on the lodge steps, his face carefully composed, but Ember could see the calculation in his eyes. He was already planning his defense, his explanation. Cassian didn't give him the chance. Gather your council, the Alpha King commanded, his voice carrying across the square. Every elder, every beta in a position of authority, every wolf who has access to pack records and territory assignments. We're having a trial, tonight. Every wolf who has access to pack. Your Majesty, Garrett began. Perhaps we should wait until morning. Give everyone time to... Tonight, Cassian repeated, and the word was a whip crack. Because every moment we delay is another moment the guilty parties have to destroy evidence or flee. And I promise you, Garrett, if anyone tries to run, I will personally hunt them down and drag them back in chains. The threat hung in the air, undeniable and absolute. Garrett bowed, his submission forced. As you command, Your Majesty. As the pack scrambled to obey, Ember felt Cassian's hand squeeze hers once more. Stay close to me tonight, he said quietly. We're about to shake this pack to its foundations, and when we do, whoever's behind this is going to get desperate. I'm not afraid, Ember lied. Cassian's smile was slight, understanding. You should be, because I have a feeling we're about to discover that the real monster isn't hiding in the shadows. He looked toward the lodge, where the pack's leadership was gathering. It's been hiding in plain sight all along. Chapter 5. The Trial of Wolves. The pack lodge had been transformed into a makeshift courtroom. Long tables formed a U-shape, with Alpha Garrett seated at the center, flanked by the 5 elders who governed Moonshadow's traditions and laws. The Beta Council, 10 wolves who managed everything from territory patrols to resource distribution, sat along the sides. At the head of the room, on a raised platform typically reserved for ceremonial occasions, Cassian had positioned himself like a judge presiding over sentence. Ember stood beside him, acutely aware of every eye in the room fixed on her. The broken Omega, returned from her execution, now standing at the Alpha King's right hand. It defied every hierarchy, every tradition, every rule they'd lived by. Good. Let's begin with the facts, Cassian said, his voice cutting through the murmured conversations. 3 children were taken over the past month. Evidence was planted in Ember's dwelling, leading to her false accusation and near execution. Today, we found those children alive in caves on the eastern border caves that also contained evidence of at least 20 additional kidnappings spanning 2 years. The room erupted. Voices overlapped in shock, denial, and growing fury. Impossible! 2 years? That can't be right. We would have noticed. Cassian's growl silenced them all. You didn't notice. Or you chose not to. Either way, children under your protection were stolen, drugged, and held captive, while you focused on executing an innocent Omega to appease your fear. Elder Moira, her ancient face creased with lines of fury and something that might have been shame, leaned forward. Your Majesty, if this is true, and I'm not conceding that it is, but if it is, then someone has been concealing these crimes with great skill. This isn't the work of rogues. This is internal. Finally, someone with sense, Dakota said from her position guarding the room's entrance. The question is, who has the authority, the access, and the motivation to do this? And who benefits? Finn added. All eyes turned to Alpha Garrett. The Alpha's face had gone carefully blank, but Ember could see his pulse hammering in his throat. You can't possibly think that I would harm children of my own pack, wouldn't you? Cassian's voice was soft, deadly. You were willing to execute Ember without a proper investigation. You were willing to let fear override justice. Why should we believe child trafficking is beyond you? Because I'm Alpha, the pack is everything to me. The pack, Thorn interjected, stepping forward with a rolled parchment in his hands. Or the pack's reputation? Because according to these records we found in the caves, every child taken was either Omega or low-ranking. Children whose disappearance wouldn't cause political complications. Children whose families lacked the power to demand answers. He unrolled the parchment on the table, revealing names, dates, and beside each entry, a sum of money. The room went deadly silent. These are ledgers, Thorn continued. Payment records for children sold to rogue networks. 23 children over 2 years, each sold for enough gold to significantly supplement pack coffers. He looked at Garrett. Coffers that you control? I've never seen those documents before in my life, Garrett said, but his voice shook. Someone is framing me, just like they framed the Omega. Except these ledgers were found in a hidden compartment in the caves, Dakota interrupted, not planted in plain sight. And the handwriting matches the style used in official pack documents. We can verify that easily enough. Ember watched the color drain from Garrett's face. Around the room, the council members shifted uncomfortably, some looking horrified, others calculating. Elder Moira stood slowly, her aged body trembling with either fury or grief. If this is true, Garrett, if you've been selling our children— I haven't. Garrett slammed his fist on the table. Yes, I knew about some disappearances. Yes, I may have deprioritized investigations into lower-ranking families. But I never sold anyone. I never participated in trafficking. Someone else is behind this. Someone trying to destroy me. Then who? Cassian demanded. Who else has access to pack funds, to territory records, to the kind of authority needed to move freely without suspicion? The silence stretched taut as a bowstring. Then Reese spoke, his voice quiet but clear. The Beta Council. We all have access to those things. Any of us could have done this. 10 pairs of eyes turned to him, some grateful for the deflection, others furious at the implication. Are you accusing us? One of the Beta Council members, a stocky wolf named Garrick, rose to his feet. I've served this pack for 30 years. My own daughter was among those who— He stopped, his face crumbling. My Sarah. She disappeared 8 months ago. We thought she ran away with a rogue male. You're telling me she was taken? Sold? The anguish in his voice was real, undeniable. Thorn checked the ledger, his expression grim. Sarah Ironhide, age 15, classified as low-ranking Omega, taken 7 months ago, sold for 200 gold pieces to a rogue network operating out of the Western Territories. Garrick's howl of grief and rage shook the rafters. He lunged across the table toward Garrett, only to be restrained by 2 other council members. You sold my daughter, Garrick roared. My child. She was 15 years old. I swear I didn't know. Garrett backed away, his composure completely shattered now. Cassian raised a hand, and the room fell silent once more. Someone in this pack is responsible. The ledgers prove that. But Garrett is right about one thing. These crimes required more than one person. This kind of operation needs someone to identify targets, someone to execute the kidnappings, someone to handle the transactions, and someone to cover the trail. He let that sink in, watching as the council members began looking at each other with suspicion and fear. So, here's what's going to happen, Cassian continued. Each of you will submit to questioning. Each of you will have your movements over the past 2 years documented and verified. Each of you will open your personal finances for inspection. And anyone who refuses or attempts to flee will be assumed guilty and treated accordingly. This is outrageous, one of the elders sputtered. We have rights. You forfeited your rights when you allowed children to be stolen and sold under your watch, Cassian said coldly. Be grateful, I'm offering investigation instead of immediate execution. Ember had remained silent throughout the proceedings, but now she felt something nagging at her mind. Something about the ledger, about the pattern of disappearances. May I? She asked quietly, reaching for the parchment. Cassian nodded, and she spread the ledger out before her, studying the entries carefully. The names, the dates, the amounts, and there a pattern. The disappearances accelerated, she said slowly, her finger tracing down the list. In the first year, only 4 children were taken, all at least 3 months apart. But in the past 6 months, the rate increased dramatically. 19 children in 6 months. Desperation, Dakota observed. Or increased demand. Or both, Ember continued, her mind racing. And look at the last 3 entries. Mira, Jace, and Lila all taken within 2 weeks of each other. All from families that had just been promoted to higher ranks. Cassian leaned closer, his eyes scanning the ledger. You're right. The earlier victims were all low-ranking, but these last 3 were meant to send a message, Ember finished. Or to distract. If you take children from powerful families, the pack mobilizes. They search, they investigate, they demand justice. It creates chaos. Chaos that would cover someone's tracks, Thorne said, understanding dawning. If the pack is focused on the new high-profile kidnappings, no one looks into the old ones, Dakota completed. This wasn't just about money, this was about creating a smokescreen. But a smokescreen for what? Finn asked. Ember's eyes continued scanning the ledger, and suddenly she saw it. A notation in the margin, written in different ink, added later. Final shipment before termination. Close operation. Eliminate evidence. Her blood ran cold. They were planning to shut down, she whispered. But they needed one last distraction. One last crisis to APT. She stopped, realization hitting her like a physical blow. To execute me, she said, looking up at Cassian. That's what this was about. The planted evidence, the rushed trial, the execution. They needed me dead before you arrived. Before anyone could investigate properly. I wasn't just a convenient scapegoat, I was a loose end. But why you specifically? Cassian asked, though his expression suggested he was already forming theories. Ember thought back, her mind sifting through years of isolation and rejection. The eastern border. I worked there for months. I saw things, the tracks, the disturbed areas near the caves. I even tried to report them. What if? Her breath caught. What if I saw more than I realized? What if someone thought I was a threat? An Omega, no one listens to, Dakota said grimly. The perfect witness to ignore until she becomes inconvenient. Reese had been silent throughout this exchange, but now he spoke up, his voice strained. Kiera. She was one of the wolves who discovered the evidence in Ember's dwelling. She brought it to my father, to Alpha Garrett. She was the one who pushed hardest for immediate execution. Ember's heart stuttered. Kiera, her childhood friend, the golden alpha who'd mocked her at Reese's mating ceremony. Where is she? Cassian demanded, his voice sharp. Reese looked around the room, and Ember saw the exact moment panic set in. She was supposed to be here. For the trial. But I haven't seen her since. The door burst open. Lyra stumbled in, blood streaming from a gash on her temple, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Your Majesty, the children, someone attacked the medical tent. Cassian was moving before she finished speaking, Dakota and Finn on his heels. Ember ran after them, her heart hammering, Reese and several council members following close behind. They reached the medical tent to find it in chaos. 2 guards lay unconscious, silvered chains scattered across the ground. The children were gone. All 3 of them. Stolen for the 2nd time in a single day. No, Ember breathed. No. Tracks. Dakota called from outside the tent. Fresh. Leading toward the western border. 2 wolves, carrying weight, moving fast. Cassian's roar shook the camp. Thorn, take half the guard and seal the eastern border. Dakota, Finn, you're with me. We're hunting. He turned to Garrick, the grieving father. You wanted justice for your daughter? Then help me stop this. Now, Garrick nodded, his eyes burning with purpose. Ember, Cassian said, turning to her. Stay here. Guard the camp. I can't risk you. They're running west, Ember interrupted, toward the old silver mines. There's a series of tunnels there, a dozen different exits. If they reach those mines, you'll never find them in time. How do you know about the mines? Because I used to work there too. Before they deemed me too weak even for mining. Ember met his eyes, refusing to back down. I know those tunnels better than anyone. You need me. Cassian's jaw clenched, the war between protection and pragmatism playing across his face. Finally, he nodded sharply. Stay close. Stay safe. And if I tell you to run, I run. I know. Ember managed a small smile. Let's go get those children back. They ran into the night, a pack of wolves united by purpose, if not by loyalty, racing against time and darkness to stop a monster wearing a familiar face. Behind them, in the chaos of the medical tent, no one noticed the small scrap of fabric caught on a tent pole. Russet fur, alpha fur, Kiara's fur. The monster wasn't just hiding in plain sight. She'd been celebrated for it. Chapter 6. The Mines of Betrayal. The western border was a wasteland of broken earth and abandoned industry. Decades ago, the silver mines had made Moonshadow Pack wealthy beyond measure, but the veins had run dry 20 years before Ember was born. Now only skeletal structures remained, rotted support beams, collapsed shafts, and a labyrinth of tunnels that stretched for miles beneath the ground. A perfect place to lose pursuers. Or to trap them. Ember led the hunting party through the darkness, her knowledge of the terrain guiding them past pitfalls and unstable ground that would have slowed anyone else. Behind her, Cassian moved like a shadow, his partially shifted form rippling with barely contained violence. Dakota and Finn flanked them, with Garrick and 3 other council members bringing up the rear wolves who'd proven their innocence through grief and rage. The main entrance is ahead, Ember whispered, pointing to a gaping hole in the hillside, its wooden supports sagging like broken ribs. But there are at least 8 other exits scattered throughout the tunnel system. If they know we're coming, they know, Cassian said grimly. They would have heard us coming from a mile away. This is a trap, then we spring it carefully. Dakota's eyes glowed amber in the darkness. Finn, take Garrick and circle to the northern exits. Seal them off. We'll drive our prey toward the eastern tunnels, they're the most unstable. Limited escape routes. Finn nodded and melted into the shadows with his assigned team. Cassian turned to Ember, his hand cupping her face with a gentleness that contradicted the predator blazing in his eyes. Last chance. You can stay here, guard the entrance, and let you walk into tunnels you don't know, that could collapse at any moment, while hunting wolves who are desperate enough to kidnap children twice? Ember covered his hand with hers. No, we do this together. The mate bond flared between them, warm and fierce, and Ember saw something shift in Cassian's expression. Not resignation, but acceptance. Trust. Together, he agreed. But you stay between me and Dakota. Always. They entered the mines. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the faint bioluminescence of cave fungi clinging to the walls. The air was thick with the scent of earth and decay, and beneath it, the metallic tang of old silver, enough residue left in the rock to make every wolf's instinct scream warnings. Ember's enhanced hearing picked up sounds deeper in the tunnels. Footsteps, whispered voices, and the muffled whimpering of terrified children. This way, she breathed, guiding them down a side passage that sloped steeply into the earth. The tunnel narrowed as they descended, the walls pressing close enough that they had to move single file. Ember's heart hammered against her ribs, her wolf instinct screaming at the confinement, the silver-tainted air, the overwhelming sense of danger. But those children needed her, needed all of them. They emerged into a wider chamber, and Ember's breath caught. The space had been converted into a makeshift prison. Silver chains hung from the walls. Cages made of silver-coated bars lined one side, and in the center, bound and gagged, were Mira, Jace, and Lila. But it was the figures standing over them that made Ember's world tilt sideways. Kiara. Beautiful, golden Kiara with her russet fur and alpha bearing, and beside her, his face a mask of cold calculation. Rhys. No, Ember whispered. Rhys, you were with us. You helped us. I delayed you, Rhys corrected, his voice empty of the kindness she'd once associated with him. Gave Kiara time to take the children and set up this meeting. You made it easier than expected, really. Always so trusting, Ember. So pathetically hopeful. Cassian's growl was volcanic. You're behind this. Behind it? No. Kiara smiled, and it was nothing like the girl Ember had known. This smile was all sharp edges and cruelty. We're just the middlemen, the facilitators. The real operation is much bigger than one pack, Your Majesty. Bigger than you can possibly imagine. The rogue networks, Dakota said, understanding dawning. You're working with them. Supplying them with children. Supplying them with product, Kiara corrected. See, that's what you noble types never understand. In the real world, power isn't about honor or justice or protecting the weak. It's about resources, control. And wolves, especially young, moldable wolves, are incredibly valuable resources. Ember felt sick. You were my friend. We grew up together. How could you... Friend? Kiara laughed, the sound echoing off the stone walls. I was never your friend. Ember. You were a convenient shadow. Something to stand next to, so I looked brighter in comparison. The pathetic Omega who made everyone else feel better about themselves. Her eyes glittered with malice. But then you started working the eastern border. Started noticing things. We couldn't have you asking questions, being curious. So we decided to eliminate two problems at once. Frame me for the kidnappings and get rid of a witness, Ember said, her voice numb. And when that didn't work, we improvised. Rhys stepped forward, his posture relaxed despite the three predators facing him. Taking the children again would bring you running, you and the Alpha King. So desperate to be heroes. So predictable. You used those children as bait, Cassian said, his voice deadly quiet. You put them through trauma twice to set a trap. They're low-ranking, Kiara said with a shrug. They would have been sold anyway. At least this way they serve a purpose. Dakota moved faster than thought, her claws extending as she lunged for Kiara. But the chamber exploded with movement, wolves emerging from hidden alcoves in the walls, at least a dozen of them, all bearing the scent of rogues and violence. The trap had been sprung. Cassian met the first attacker head-on, his partial shift completing in an instant. He was devastating all raw power and controlled fury, tearing through opponents like paper. Dakota fought beside him, her movements precise and lethal, but they were outnumbered, and more wolves kept emerging from the tunnels. Ember saw Rhys moving toward the children, a silver dagger in his hand, and understood with horrible clarity. They were going to kill the pups, eliminate the evidence, along with the witnesses. No. Something inside, Ember snapped. Not broke, transformed. All the years of being told she was weak, worthless, broken, all the pain and rejection and humiliation, it crystallized into a single burning purpose. Protect the children. She didn't think. She didn't plan. She just moved. Ember hit Rhys with the full force of her body weight, driving him away from the children. They tumbled across the stone floor, and she felt his surprise more than heard it. The broken Omega had attacked him, had dared to touch him. Ember. What are you? Rhys tried to throw her off, but desperation gave her strength she'd never known she possessed. Her teeth found his throat, not deep enough to kill, but enough to make him scream. Stay away from them, she snarled, her voice barely human. Rhys backhanded her, sending her crashing into the wall. Pain exploded across her ribs, but she forced herself up, placing her body between him and the children. You stupid Omega, Rhys hissed, blood streaming from his throat. You think this changes anything? You're still nothing, still weak, still... Cassian's roar shook the chamber. The Alpha King had seen Rhys strike Ember, and his fury was transcendent. He tore through the remaining rogues with renewed savagery, each movement a promise of violence. Kiera saw the tide turning and made her decision. She shifted fully, her wolf form magnificent and powerful, and bolted for one of the side tunnels. "Coward!" Garrick howled, giving chase. 2 other council members followed. The battle was ending. The rogues who weren't dead were fleeing, their confidence shattered by Cassian's overwhelming dominance. Rhys tried to follow Kiera, tried to escape. But Dakota caught him by the leg and dragged him back with ruthless efficiency. Ember stayed focused on the children. Her hands shook as she worked at their bonds, her broken ribs screaming with every movement. But she didn't stop. Couldn't stop. "It's okay," she whispered to Mira, who was finally waking from the drugs. "You're safe. I've got you." "Ember?" The little girl's voice was hoarse, terrified. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here." Cassian appeared at her side, his shifted form receding, his hands infinitely gentle as he helped free the last of the bonds. "You're hurt." "I'm fine." "You're bleeding. Your ribs are broken." "I'm fine." Ember met his eyes, and whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. They gathered the children carefully, wrapping them in blankets Dakota had thought to bring. Garrick returned, dragging an unconscious and shifted Kiera by her scruff. The other council members carried 2 captured rogues who'd chosen survival over loyalty. "The others?" Cassian asked. "Dead or fled," Garrick said grimly. "But we have these 3. It's enough." Rhys knelt in the center of the chamber, silver chains binding his wrists, his throat still bleeding from Ember's bite. He looked smaller somehow, diminished. The confident beta air was gone, replaced by something desperate and cornered. "You're going to kill me," he said flatly. "Eventually," Cassian agreed. "But first, you're going to tell me everything. Every name, every contact, every detail of this operation. You're going to help me dismantle the entire network that's been trafficking children across the Northern Territories. And if I refuse?" Cassian smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Ember had ever seen. "Then I'll let Garrick have you. He's been very patient, waiting to meet the wolves who sold his daughter. I imagine his patience is running thin." Garrick's answering smile was all teeth. Rhys paled. "I want immunity. Protection. I can give you names, locations, but only if you guarantee." "You're in no position to negotiate," Dakota interrupted. "You're going to talk because the alternative is worse. Much worse." As they prepared to leave the mines, Ember felt Cassian's hand on her shoulder. She turned, and he pulled her close, his forehead resting against hers. "You were amazing," he whispered. "When you attacked Rhys, protected those children, I've never seen anything braver. I didn't think. You just proved that strength has nothing to do with rank or power." His hand cupped her face. "You proved what I knew the moment I saw you. You're extraordinary, Ember, in every way that actually matters." The mate bond blazed between them, and Ember felt tears burning her eyes, not from pain, but from something she'd never expected to feel again. Hope. They emerged from the mines into pre-dawn light, carrying the rescued children and their traitorous prisoners. The pack would have to answer for what had been allowed to happen under their watch. Justice would be slow and painful, but for now, 3 children were safe. And Ember, the broken Omega who'd been sentenced to death, stood beside the Alpha King as his equal. If you felt Ember's pain turn to power, subscribe. Because survivors like her need witnesses who understand that healing isn't gentle, it's fierce. And it starts with refusing to stay down. Comment below. What would you do to the traitors who sold those children? Tell me your justice. The pack's reckoning was only beginning. But in the growing light, with Cassian's hand in hers and the children's lives saved, Ember allowed herself to believe in something she'd thought lost forever. A future. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. The trial of Rhys Blackwater and Kiera Nightshade lasted 3 days. Cassian had ordered the pack to assemble every morning in the central square, where a platform had been erected for the proceedings. No one was exempt, not the elders, not the council members, not even the lowest-ranking Omegas who typically hid in the margins of pack life. Everyone would witness justice, or the consequences of its absence. Ember stood beside Cassian throughout it all, her presence a silent statement that even the Alpha King couldn't make alone. The broken could be made whole. The rejected could find worth, and those who'd been deemed disposable were anything but. On the first day, Rhys talked. He talked for hours, his voice mechanical and empty, as he detailed the operation that had stolen 23 children over 2 years. The rogue contacts, the payment schedules, the safe houses where children were held before being transported across territorial borders. The corrupt officials in other packs who looked the other way for a cut of the profits. It started small, Rhys said, his eyes fixed on the ground. Just one child. An Omega from a family with no influence. Kiera came to me with the opportunity, said the rogue networks were paying good money for young wolves. Said it was victimless, that these children would have terrible lives anyway in a pack that didn't value them. Victimless, Garrick repeated, his voice shaking with barely controlled rage. My daughter had a name, Sarah. She liked to sing. She wanted to be a healer. Tell me how her kidnapping was victimless. Rhys flinched but didn't respond. Continue, Cassian ordered coldly. The money was good. Better than good. We used it to fund other things. Territory expansions. Better weapons. Kiera wanted to challenge for Alpha position, and that requires resources. Rhys finally looked up, his eyes landing on Ember. When you started noticing things on the eastern border, Ember, we couldn't risk you asking questions. Couldn't risk anyone actually listening to you for once. So you decided to kill her, Dakota said flatly. Kiera decided. Rhys's voice cracked. I just went along with it. Like I went along with everything else. Coward, Elder Moira spat, her ancient face twisted with disgust. You hide behind that woman's ambition, but you made your choices. You chose gold over children, power over honor. And what would you have chosen? Rhys shot back, some of his old fire returning. You sit in your comfortable lodges, making judgments, but you never questioned where the pack's newfound wealth came from. Never asked why certain families' children kept disappearing. You looked away because it was convenient. The accusation hung in the air like poison. Elder Moira's face paled, but she didn't deny it. Cassian's expression remained carved from stone. Everyone who looked away is complicit. Everyone who chose convenience over truth shares in this guilt. His gaze swept across the assembled pack. But you two, you and Kiera, you are the architects, and you will face the full weight of justice. On the second day, they questioned Kiera. Unlike Rhys, she didn't break, didn't show remorse. She stood on the platform with her head high, her russet hair gleaming in the sunlight, defiant even in chains. I did what I had to do to rise, she said simply. This pack values strength above all else. I showed strength. I took what I wanted and eliminated obstacles. That's what alphas do. Alphas protect, Cassian corrected. They don't prey on their own pack, don't they? Kiera's smile was sharp. You're the Alpha King. How many wolves have you sacrificed for the greater good? How many have you let suffer because addressing their pain was politically inconvenient? Don't pretend you're different from me, Your Majesty. You just have better PR. Ember saw Cassian's jaw tighten, saw the flicker of something in his eyes, not guilt, but recognition. The burden of leadership, the impossible choices. The difference, Cassian said quietly, is that I lose sleep over those choices. I carry the weight of every wolf I couldn't save. You, on the other hand, see children as currency and feel nothing. Feeling doesn't change reality, Kiera countered. This pack is dying. Our territory shrinks every year. Our resources dwindle. I found a way to secure our future. By selling children, Garrick roared, lunging toward the platform. 3 guards held him back. You sold my Sarah. She was 15 years old and you sold her like livestock. Kiera's expression didn't change. She was low-ranking. Weak. She would have been a drain on pack resources her entire life. I gave her purpose. The crowd erupted in fury. Wolves howled, shouted, demanded blood. Ember watched families who'd lost children push forward, their grief transforming into rage, and for a moment she thought they might tear Kiera apart right there on the platform. Cassian raised his hand, and his dominance rolled out like a tidal wave, forcing every wolf to their knees in submission. There will be justice, he said, his voice carrying across the square. But it will be civilized. It will be lawful. We are not rogues. We are not monsters, no matter how much they tried to make us into them. Slowly, the crowd settled, though the rage remained a palpable, burning thing. Kiera Nightshade, Cassian continued. You are found guilty of conspiracy, kidnapping, trafficking of minors, attempted murder, and treason against your pack. The sentence is death. Kiera's defiance finally cracked. Wait, you can't. I have information. Contacts in other packs. Names of other operations. We have Reese for that, Dakota said coldly. We don't need you. Please. For the first time, genuine fear crossed Kiera's face. I can help. I can give you everything. Just don't. You showed no mercy to the children you sold, Cassian said. You will receive none in return. Execution will be carried out at sunset tomorrow. Guards dragged Kiera away, her screams echoing across the square as the reality of her fate finally penetrated her armor of arrogance. Ember should have felt satisfaction, justice, victory. Instead, she felt empty. On the third day, the pack decided Reese's fate. Because he'd cooperated, because he'd provided information that would help dismantle the larger network, Cassian offered the pack a choice: death or permanent exile with a tracking collar, forced to live as a lone wolf for the rest of his life. Death would be kinder, Thorne observed. Wolves aren't meant to live alone. That's the point, Cassian replied. The vote was swift and nearly unanimous. Exile. Let him live with his guilt, alone, forever reminded of what he'd lost and could never regain. Reese received the news with something that looked like relief. Perhaps death had been what he'd wanted all along. Exile meant he'd have to survive, have to face himself every day. A much crueler punishment. Before he was taken away, Reese looked at Ember one last time. I'm sorry, he said quietly. For what it's worth. I'm sorry I didn't defend you when I had the chance. Sorry I chose ambition over what was right. Ember met his eyes, searching for manipulation, for another lie. But she saw only exhaustion and genuine regret. I don't forgive you, she said simply. But I hope you learn to forgive yourself. Because that's a punishment that will last longer than any exile. Reese nodded slowly, then allowed the guards to lead him away. As sunset approached, the pack gathered for Kiera's execution. It would be done in the old way by combat. Alpha Garrett, as the wronged pack leader, had the right to carry out the sentence personally, but when he stepped forward to accept the duty, another voice rang out. I challenge for executioner's right. Garrick stood in the center of the square, his face lined with grief and determination. She sold my daughter. I claim the right of vengeance. The crowd murmured, uncertain. It was unusual for a beta to claim such a right, especially against an alpha-born wolf like Kiera, but Cassian nodded. Granted, the father's claim supersedes tradition. Kiera was brought out in chains, her fear now naked and raw. She'd been broken over the 3 days of trial, her confidence stripped away piece by piece. Please, she whispered, as the chains were removed. Please, I don't want to die. Neither did the children you sold, Garrick said quietly. But they died anyway, alone, terrified, calling for parents who couldn't save them. He shifted then, his beta wolf massive and gray, scarred from years of hard labor and harder life. Kiera shifted too, her alpha form beautiful and powerful, but her spirit was already defeated. The fight lasted less than a minute. Garrick's grief gave him strength that transcended rank or power. He fought not for dominance or territory, but for his daughter's memory. For every stolen child, for justice that had been too long delayed. When it was over, when Kiera's body lay still on the blood-stained earth, Garrick shifted back to human form and wept. Ember turned away, unable to watch anymore. She'd wanted justice, had demanded it, but seeing it carried out, watching life drain from someone she'd once called friend, however falsely, left her feeling hollowed out. Cassian's arms came around her, steady and warm. Come. You don't need to see this. He led her away from the square, away from the crowd, and the grief and the weight of justice fulfilled. They walked to the edge of the territory, to a small clearing where moonlight filtered through the trees like silver rain. Are you all right? He asked softly. I don't know. Ember admitted. I thought seeing them punished would make me feel something. Vindication, maybe. Closure. But I just feel tired. Justice doesn't heal wounds, Cassian said, his hand finding hers. It just stops the bleeding long enough for healing to begin. But the healing itself? That takes time. And work. And people who refuse to let you hide in your pain. Ember looked up at him. At this powerful alpha who disrupted his entire schedule, challenged pack tradition, and risked political complications all to save one broken Omega. Why did you really save me? She whispered. That night in the execution circle. You felt the mate bond, yes, but you could have walked away. Could have let them kill me and avoided all of this mess. Why didn't you? Cassian was silent for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on the back of her hand. Finally, he spoke. When I was young, my father told me that a true alpha's strength is measured not by how fiercely they protect the strong, but by how gently they lift up the weak. I didn't understand what he meant, until I saw you kneeling in that circle. His golden eyes met hers, burning with intensity. You were surrounded by wolves who should have protected you, should have valued you, should have seen your worth, and instead, they chose to destroy you for their own comfort. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel his heartbeat. I saved you because letting you die would have made me complicit in their cruelty. I saved you because every instinct I possessed screamed that you mattered, even if no one else could see it. And I saved you because... He paused, vulnerability flickering across his face. Because the moment I looked into your eyes, I knew my life would never be complete without you in it. The mate bond flared between them, stronger than ever, and Ember felt tears slip down her cheeks. I don't know how to be someone's mate, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know how to be worth all of this. Then we'll figure it out together, Cassian replied, echoing his words from days ago. One day at a time. One moment at a time. Until you believe what I already know. What's that? That you were never broken, Ember. You were just surrounded by people too blind to see how brightly you shine. He kissed her then, soft and careful, a promise of protection and partnership, and a future neither of them had dared to imagine. And in that clearing, under the moon's gentle gaze, Ember finally allowed herself to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could be whole. The next morning, Cassian made his announcement. I'm taking Ember as my mate, he told the assembled pack, his voice brooking no argument. She will be Luna of all northern territories. Anyone who challenges this decision challenges me directly. The silence was absolute. Then, slowly, one wolf knelt, then another, and another, not in submission, but in acceptance. The broken Omega had become their queen, and a new chapter for her, for Cassian, for all of them, was finally beginning. Chapter 8, The Luna's Burden. The mating ceremony was scheduled for the next full moon 10 days away. 10 days that Ember spent in a strange limbo between her old life and a future she still couldn't quite believe in. She'd moved from the medical tent to Cassian's personal quarters, a spacious pavilion that made her feel simultaneously safe and exposed. The King's Guard treated her with careful respect now, though she caught them watching her sometimes with expressions she couldn't quite read. Doubt, maybe, or curiosity, or the weight of wondering whether the broken Omega could truly become their Luna. She wondered the same thing. You're thinking loudly again, Cassian said from where he sat, reviewing reports at his desk. They'd fallen into an easy routine over the past week. Him working while she read or practiced the formal speech patterns Lyra insisted a Luna needed to know. Existing in comfortable proximity, the mate bond humming contentedly between them. I'm always thinking loudly, Ember replied, setting down the etiquette manual she'd been pretending to read. It's one of my few talents. Cassian looked up, his golden eyes warm with amusement. Your talents include surviving years of systematic abuse, identifying a trafficking operation everyone else missed, attacking a beta 3 times your size to protect children, and making me laugh when I've spent the day reading reports about corrupt pack officials. I'd say you have more than a few. Ember felt heat rise to her cheeks. Even after days of his steady affection, his casual praise, she still didn't know how to accept compliments without feeling like they were tricks or tests. The pack is talking, she said, changing the subject. About us. About whether I'm suitable. Let them talk. Cassian. He set down his papers and crossed to where she sat, kneeling so they were eye level. Ember, listen to me. There will always be wolves who question you, who think you're not strong enough, or dominant enough, or whatever enough. But you know what? Those same wolves questioned me when I became Alpha King at 25. Said I was too young, too idealistic, too unwilling to make the hard choices. What changed their minds? Nothing. They still question me. Still whisper that I'm soft. That I care too much about weak wolves and not enough about traditional power. His hand cupped her face. But I don't lead for their approval. I lead because someone has to stand between power and the vulnerable. Just like you stood between Reese and those children. That was different. That was instinct. Exactly. Your instinct is to protect, to shield, to fight for those who can't fight for themselves. That's what makes you perfect for this role. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Aluna isn't just a mate. She's the heart of the pack while the alpha is the spine. She sees the wolves others overlook. She fights battles that don't involve claws and teeth. She makes sure strength doesn't become cruelty. You make it sound noble, Ember whispered. But I'm terrified. What if I fail? What if I can't be what they need? Then you'll try again the next day, and the day after that, until one day, you'll look back and realize you've become exactly who you were meant to be. Cassian pressed his forehead to hers. I believe in you, Ember, even when you don't believe in yourself. A knock interrupted them. Thorn entered, his expression carefully neutral. Your Majesty, there's been a development with the interrogation of the captured rogues. Cassian straightened immediately, his entire demeanor shifting from gentle mate to commanding alpha. What kind of development? What? One of them is asking to speak with Ember specifically. Says he has information about her family that she needs to hear. Ember's blood ran cold. My family? But my mother is dead, she'd assumed. Alara had left the pack 5 years ago, unable to bear the shame of having a broken daughter. Ember had never heard from her again. He claims your mother isn't dead. Thorn continued, his voice carefully even. He says she's alive. And that she's been working with the trafficking network. The world tilted sideways. No, Ember breathed. That's not possible. My mother wouldn't. She left, because she was ashamed of me. But she would never. Cassian's hand found hers, grounding her. It might be a lie. A manipulation tactic. Or it might be true, Ember said, her voice hollow. And I need to know. The captured rogue was being held in a reinforced cell at the edge of Camp's silver-lined bars, ensuring he couldn't shift or escape. He was young, barely older than Ember, with the kind of hardness in his eyes that spoke of a life lived on the margins of wolf society. You wanted to see me, Ember said, standing just outside the bars with Cassian and Thorn flanking her. The rogue looked up, studied her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. You're Alara's daughter. I can see it. You have her eyes. Where is she? Ember demanded, hating the tremor in her voice. Safe, comfortable, living better than she ever did in that backwater pack. The rogue smiled, showing too many teeth. See, your mother was smart. When she realized you were never going to amount to anything, that you'd drag her down with your weakness, she made a deal. What kind of deal? Information for gold. She told us about the pack's patrol routes, about which families had children no one would miss, about the eastern border caves. In exchange, we set her up in the western territories with enough money to live however she wanted. Ember felt like she'd been gutted. You're lying. Am I? How else would we have known so much about Moonshadow's internal structure? How else would we have identified you as the perfect scapegoat? The rogue leaned forward. Your mother sold you out, little Omega. Told Kiera exactly how to frame you. Exactly what evidence would be most damning. She wanted you dead, so she could finally be free of the shame you represented. Enough, Cassian growled. But Ember held up a hand. Why are you telling me this? She asked, forcing her voice to remain steady even as her world crumbled. Because I want a deal. My freedom in exchange for your mother's location. She's the one you really want, the one who started this whole operation in Moonshadow. Kiera and Reese were just her puppets. Cassian's laugh was cold. You think we'd let you go free? After what you've done? I think you want answers more than you want my blood. The rogue's eyes remained fixed on Ember. And I think she deserves to confront the woman who gave birth to her and then traded her life for gold. Don't you? Ember wanted to say no. Wanted to walk away, to let this piece of information die here in this cell. But the need to know, to understand why her own mother would betray her so completely, was overwhelming. Where is she? Ember asked quietly. Ember, you don't have to do this, Cassian said. We can find her other ways. I need to know, please. Cassian's jaw tightened, but he nodded. To the rogue, he said, you'll tell us her location. In exchange, I won't kill you. You'll be exiled with a tracking collar, same as Reese. But if you're lying, if this is a trap, I will hunt you down personally and make your death last days. Understood? The rogue swallowed hard but nodded. She's in the Western Territories, small town called Ashford, about 3 days' journey from here. Lives in a house on the river under the name Alara Riversong. She thinks she's safe. Thinks no one will ever connect her to what happened here. She's wrong, Ember said, her voice harder than she'd ever heard it. They left at dawn, Ember, Cassian, Dakota, and Finn, a small group, fast and efficient. Thorn remained behind to manage the continued interrogations and to coordinate with other packs who'd reported similar disappearances. The journey west took them through territories Ember had never seen, landscapes that shifted from forest to plains to the rolling hills that marked the borderlands between pack territories and rogue country. Cassian stayed close to her the entire time, his presence a steady anchor while her mind spiraled through memories and doubts. Had her mother always hated her? Had every moment of childhood affection been a lie? Or had the shame and social isolation slowly poisoned whatever love Alara had once felt? You don't have to confront her, Cassian said on the second night as they made camp. We can handle this without you. Arrest her, bring her to justice. I need to hear it from her. Ember interrupted. I need to look her in the eyes and understand how a mother could do this to her child. Some people don't deserve understanding. Maybe not. But I deserve closure. Cassian pulled her close, wrapping her in his warmth and his scent pine and winter storms and safety. Whatever happens, whatever she says, remember, her choices say nothing about your worth. She's the one who failed, not you. Ember wanted to believe him, desperately, but the scared child inside her, the one who'd been rejected and abandoned, kept whispering that maybe her mother had been right. Maybe she was too broken, too worthless, too much of a burden. The mate bond pulsed, and she felt Cassian's response. Fierce love, an absolute rejection of those poisonous thoughts. He couldn't read her mind, but he could feel her emotional state through the bond, and his wolf was trying to comfort hers. I love you, he said quietly. I know we haven't said it yet, but I need you to know. Whatever we find in Ashford, whatever truth we uncover, I love you. Completely, irrevocably, and nothing will change that. Tears burned behind Ember's eyes. I don't know if I'm ready to say it back, not because I don't feel it, but because I'm scared. Everyone I've ever loved has left me. I'm not going anywhere, Cassian promised. Not today, not tomorrow, not ever. They reached Ashford on the third day. It was a small settlement, maybe 100 wolves, nestled along a river that sparkled in the afternoon sun. Peaceful, prosperous, the kind of place where wolves came to escape their pasts and build new futures. The house on the river was easy to find, a modest structure with a garden full of herbs and flowers. Smoke curled from the chimney. Someone was home. Ember's hands trembled as she approached the door. Behind her, Cassian and the others waited, giving her space but ready to intervene if needed. She knocked. Footsteps. The door opened, and there stood Alara. Her mother looked older than Ember remembered, with silver streaking through her dark hair and lines of worry etched around her eyes. But she was well-fed, well-dressed, clearly comfortable, thriving. While Ember had been kneeling for execution, her mother had been living in peace. Alara's face went white. Ember? But you should be dead, Ember finished, her voice cold. Yes, that was the plan, wasn't it? Frame me for kidnappings you helped orchestrate. Let the pack execute me. Free yourself from the burden of having a broken daughter. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't. The word cracked like a whip. Don't lie to me. Not now. Not after everything. I know, Mother. I know you gave Kiera information about the pack. I know you helped set up the trafficking operation. I know you told them exactly how to frame me. Alara's face crumbled, and for a moment, Ember saw genuine grief there. But it was quickly replaced by something harder. Defensive. You don't understand, Alara said. You have no idea what it was like, raising a child who would never amount to anything. The shame. The humiliation every time someone looked at you with pity. I gave up everything for you. And you repaid me by being nothing. The words should have hurt. A week ago, they would have destroyed her, but Ember had stood beside the Alpha King, had saved children, had faced down her demons and survived. I was a child, Ember said quietly. I was your daughter, and you sold me to save your pride. I did what I had to do to survive. No, you did what was easiest, and now you're going to face the consequences. Cassian stepped forward then, his dominance rolling out like thunder. Alara Riversong, formerly of Moonshadow Pack, you are under arrest for conspiracy, trafficking of minors, attempted murder, and treason. You will be brought before the Territorial Council to answer for your crimes. Alara tried to run. She made it 3 steps before Dakota had her pinned to the ground, silver chains materializing with practiced efficiency. As her mother was dragged away, screaming denials and accusations, Ember stood frozen. She'd wanted closure, wanted answers. But all she felt was empty. Cassian's arms came around her, and she finally broke. Great, heaving sobs that shook her entire body. Years of pain and rejection and abandonment pouring out in a flood she couldn't control. I've got you, Cassian murmured, holding her through the storm. Let it out. I've got you. And there, in a strange town beside a peaceful river, Ember finally grieved the mother she'd never really had. The mother who'd chosen gold over her daughter's life. Chapter 9. The Luna Rises. The journey back to Moonshadow territory was somber. Alara traveled in chains, silent and sullen, refusing to speak or even look at her daughter. Ember was grateful for the silence. She had nothing left to say to the woman who'd given her life only to orchestrate her death. Instead, she focused on the future. On the full moon that was now only 3 days away. On the ceremony that would bind her to Cassian forever and make her Luna of the Northern Territories. On becoming someone who could protect others from the kind of pain she'd endured. You're doing it again, Cassian said as they made camp on their final night of travel. Doing what? Carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. He settled beside her, his warmth a comfort against the evening chill. You don't have to fix everything, Ember. You don't have to make up for what she did. Don't I? Ember pulled her knees to her chest. She started this operation because of me, because I was such a disappointment that she'd rather traffic children than bear the shame of having a broken daughter. If I'd been stronger, been better. Stop. Cassian's voice was firm but gentle. Your mother's choices are hers alone. She could have loved you, could have protected you, could have been proud of the daughter who survived despite everything. Instead, she chose cruelty and greed. That's on her, not you. Then why does it feel like my fault? Because you have a good heart. Because you still believe that if you'd just been different, been more, you could have earned her love. Cassian turned her to face him, his golden eyes intense. But love isn't something you earn, Ember. It's something freely given. And anyone who makes you fight for basic affection doesn't deserve you. Ember wanted to argue, to explain the complex tangle of guilt and grief and rage that twisted in her chest. But Cassian kissed her before she could speak, soft and sweet, and full of the steady devotion he'd shown since the moment they met. 3 more days, he murmured against her lips. 3 more days until you're officially mine and I'm officially yours. Until the whole world knows that the broken Omega became a queen. I'm terrified, Ember admitted. What if I'm not ready? What if I fail? Then we'll fail together, and pick ourselves up and try again. Cassian's smile was crooked, vulnerable in a way he rarely showed. I'm terrified too, you know. Terrified that you'll wake up one day and realize you could have done so much better than a king who's barely holding his territories together. Terrified that I'm not enough to heal the wounds they left on your soul. You are enough, Ember said fiercely, surprised by her own conviction. You're more than enough. You're everything. The mate bond flared between them, warm and golden, and Ember felt something shift in her chest. Not healing, not yet, but the beginning of it. The first tentative belief that maybe, possibly, she could actually be happy, that maybe she deserved to be. They reached Moonshadow Pack at midday, and the entire territory was transformed. Garlands of silver flowers, moonblooms, sacred to the goddess, hung from every tree and building. White silk banners bearing the king's crest fluttered in the breeze, and in the central square, a raised platform had been constructed for the mating ceremony, decorated with crystals that would catch and reflect the full moon's light. It was beautiful. Overwhelming. Terrifying. Lyra met them at the border, her expression a mixture of relief and excitement. Thank the goddess. I was starting to worry you wouldn't make it back in time. The entire Northern Territories have sent representatives, alphas, lunas, council members. Everyone wants to witness the ceremony. Everyone wants to judge whether I'm worthy, Ember corrected quietly. Let them judge. Lyra's smile was sharp. They'll see exactly what I see, a wolf who survived the impossible and came out stronger for it. Elara was taken directly to the holding cells, her fate to be decided after the ceremony. Ember caught her mother's eyes once as she was led away and saw only emptiness there. No remorse, no love, just the bitter resentment of someone who'd gambled everything and lost. Ember turned away. She was done mourning a mother who'd never existed. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparations. Lyra coached Ember on ceremony protocols, where to stand, what words to say, how to accept the Luna marks that would be tattooed onto her wrists in silver ink. Dakota drilled her on the names and ranks of every important wolf who'd be attending, making sure Ember could navigate the political landscape without embarrassing herself, or Cassian. And in the quiet moments between lessons and fittings, Cassian stole her away to walk through the forest or sit by the river, reminding her that beneath all the ceremony and politics, this was about them, about two wolves choosing each other against all odds. I have something for you, he said the night before the ceremony, producing a small wooden box from his pocket. Inside was a necklace, a delicate silver chain with a pendant shaped like a crescent moon. But it wasn't the beauty of the piece that made Ember's breath catch. It was what was embedded in the moon's curve, a small crystal that glowed with a soft, pulsing light. It's a moonstone, Cassian explained. Infused with a drop of my blood. It's an old tradition when an alpha takes a mate. He gives her a piece of his essence, so that even when we're apart, you'll carry my strength with you. Ember touched the pendant with trembling fingers. Cassian, I don't have anything to give you. I don't have anything to give you. You've already given me everything. His hands cupped her face. You gave me hope, purpose, a reason to be better than I am. That's worth more than any gift. He fastened the necklace around her throat, and Ember felt the moonstone's warmth spread through her chest. It was like carrying a piece of the mate bond externally, a physical reminder that she wasn't alone anymore. Tomorrow, Cassian whispered, you become Luna. But tonight, you're just Ember. And I want you to know that I would have chosen you even without the bond. Even without fate's intervention. I would have seen you in that execution circle and known that my life would never be complete without you in it. Ember kissed him then, pouring everything she couldn't say into the contact. All her fear and hope and desperate, fragile love. Tomorrow, she would be a queen. But tonight, she was just a girl who'd finally found someone who saw her worth. The full moon rose like a silver coin, massive and luminous, painting the world in shades of pearl and shadow. The entire pack, along with representatives from a dozen other territories, gathered in the central square, forming a circle around the ceremonial platform. Ember stood in the preparation tent, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might bruise her ribs. She wore a gown of white silk that flowed like water, simple but elegant. Her dark hair had been woven with moonblooms. The only jewelry she wore was Cassian's necklace and the silver cuffs that would soon bear her Luna marks. You look like moonlight given form, Lyra said, adjusting the final flower in Ember's hair. like the goddess herself decided to walk among us. I look like I'm about to throw up, Ember corrected, though she managed a weak smile. That too. Lyra squeezed her hand. But you're going to be amazing. Just remember, you've already survived the hard part. This is just making it official. Music began to play drums and flutes, creating a haunting melody that seemed to resonate with the moonlight itself. It was time. Ember stepped out of the tent. The crowd parted, creating a path to the platform where Cassian waited. He wore ceremonial armor, silver plates over black leather, marked with the sigils of his kingship. But it was his face that captured her attention. The way he looked at her like she was the only wolf in the world, like she was everything. The mate bond sang between them, and Ember felt her fear begin to dissolve. This was right. Whatever came after, whatever challenges they'd face, this moment was exactly where she was meant to be. She walked toward him, her steps growing stronger with each pace, past the wolves who'd rejected her, past the families who'd looked through her like she was invisible, past Elder Moira, who watched with an expression that might have been approval. Ember reached the platform and climbed the steps. Cassian took her hands, his grip warm and steady, and the world narrowed to just the two of them. Alpha Garrett diminished in power, but still pack leader, until a replacement could be chosen, performed the ceremony. His voice was formal, stripped of personality, as he recited the ancient words. Under the moon's witness, we gather to bind two souls, Alpha and Omega, King and Luna, equal partners in leadership and in love. He turned to Cassian. Do you, Cassian Shadowborn, Alpha King of the Northern Territories, take this wolf as your mate? To stand beside her in strength, to shelter her in weakness, to honor her in all things? I do, Cassian said, his voice carrying across the square. I take Ember as my mate, my Luna, my equal in all things. I vow to protect her, to cherish her, and to remind her every day that she was never broken, only surrounded by people too blind to see her light. Tears burned behind Ember's eyes at the addition to the traditional vows, a promise meant specifically for her. Garrett turned to Ember. Do you, Ember, formerly of Moonshadow Pack, take this Alpha as your mate? To stand beside him in strength, to shelter him in weakness, to honor him in all things? Ember took a breath, feeling the weight of every eye upon her. Then she looked at Cassian, and found her courage. I do, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. I take Cassian as my mate, my Alpha, my equal in all things. I vow to stand with him, to fight beside him, and to remind him every day that true strength isn't about power. It's about choosing kindness, even when the world demands cruelty. Cassian's smile was brilliant, proud, full of love so fierce it made her chest ache. Garrett produced the tattooing needles, silver-tipped and blessed under a dozen full moons. The marks of Luna, worn by every queen who has led with wisdom and courage. Ember, extend your wrists. Ember did, her hands trembling only slightly. The tattooing was quick but painful, silver ink etched into her skin in intricate patterns that resembled flowering vines. On her right wrist, the crescent moon of the Luna. On her left, Cassian's personal sigil, marking her as his chosen mate. When it was done, when the marks gleamed silver against her skin, Garrett stepped back. By the moon's light and the pack's witness, I declare you mated. Luna Ember Shadowborn, Queen of the Northern Territories. May your reign be long, and your love be eternal. The crowd erupted in howls, a deafening chorus that spoke of acceptance, celebration, and the end of one chapter, and the beginning of another. Cassian pulled Ember close and kissed her, claiming her before the moon and the pack and the world. The mate bond exploded between them, no longer just a connection but a fusion, two souls becoming one while remaining distinct. When they finally broke apart, breathless and smiling, Ember looked out at the assembled wolves, and felt something she'd never experienced before. Belonging. She belonged here. With him. With this future they'd build together. My Luna, Cassian murmured, his forehead pressed to hers. My Alpha, Ember replied, and in that moment, under the full moon's silver gaze, the broken Omega who'd knelt for execution finally became whole. The celebration lasted long into the night, music and dancing, feasting and laughter. Wolves from territories that had never spoken to each other shared food and stories. Children played games while their parents negotiated alliances and trade agreements. It was everything a mating celebration should be: joyful, communal, hopeful. But as the night wore on, as the moon began its descent toward the horizon, Ember found herself standing at the edge of the gathering, looking back at the holding cells where her mother waited for judgment. Cassian appeared at her side, always attuned to her emotional state through their bond. "Do you want to see her? One last time?" Ember considered, then nodded. "I think I need to." They walked to the cells together, the celebration's music fading behind them. Alara sat in her cell, her face gaunt in the moonlight, her eyes hollow. "Come to gloat?" Alara asked bitterly. "No," Ember said quietly. "I came to tell you that I forgive you." Alara's eyes widened. "What?" "I forgive you. Not because you deserve it, not because what you did was forgivable, but because I refuse to let your hatred define the rest of my life." Ember touched the Luna marks on her wrists. "You wanted me dead because I was broken, but I was never broken, Mother. I was just inconvenient, and that says everything about you, and nothing about me. You think becoming some king's trophy makes you special?" Alara sneered. "You're still the same worthless Omega you always were." "She's my Luna," Cassian interrupted, his voice cold as winter. "She's the wolf who survived everything you threw at her and became stronger for it. She's the reason I still believe there's good in this world. And she is worth 1,000 of you." Alara had no response to that. She simply turned away, retreating into the darkness of her cell. Ember and Cassian walked back to the celebration hand in hand. "Thank you," Ember said, "for defending me, for believing in me. Always," Cassian promised. "From now until the moon itself falls from the sky." They rejoined the celebration, and Ember allowed herself to be swept up in the joy, in the dancing and the laughter, and the feeling of being surrounded by people who, if not all of them, loved her yet at least accepted her right to exist. She was Luna now, and tomorrow, she would begin the work of making sure no other wolf ever felt as alone and worthless as she once had. But tonight, she was just Ember, mated to the Alpha King, loved beyond measure. Finally, impossibly, home. Chapter 10. The Omega, who became queen. 3 months had passed since the mating ceremony, and the Northern Territories had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. Ember stood on the balcony of the Royal Lodge, a permanent structure Cassian had ordered, built on neutral ground between territories, and watched the sun rise over the forest. The lodge had become the seat of their shared governance, a place where wolves from every pack could come to seek justice, request aid, or simply be heard. Because that was what Ember had insisted upon from her first day as Luna. Everyone deserved to be heard. Behind her, she heard Cassian stirring, felt his presence through the mate bond before his arms wrapped around her waist, pulling her back against his chest. "You're up early," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Couldn't sleep?" "Too much to think about." Ember leaned into his warmth, her hand covering his where it rested on her stomach. "The council meeting today, the new policies we're proposing. Whether the Alphas will accept changes that challenge everything they've built their power on. They'll accept them," Cassian said with confidence. "Because you'll make them see that strength built on the suffering of the weak is no strength at all. You've been doing it for months." They're starting to listen. It was true. Slowly, painfully, but true. In the 3 months since becoming Luna, Ember had worked tirelessly to implement reforms across the territories. She'd started with the most vulnerable, Omegas like herself, low-ranking wolves, children from families with no political power. She'd established safe houses in every pack places, where wolves facing abuse or rejection could find shelter and support. She'd created a reporting system for missing persons that couldn't be ignored or swept aside. She'd demanded that every pack submit to regular audits of their treatment of lower-ranking members. The resistance had been fierce. Alphas who'd built their authority on traditional hierarchies didn't appreciate a Luna, especially an Omega Luna, telling them how to run their packs. But Cassian had stood beside her through every challenge, every threat, every attempt to undermine her authority. And slowly, wolves had begun to see what he'd seen from the beginning, that true leadership required both strength and compassion. "I heard from Garrick yesterday," Ember said. changing the subject to something that made her heart lighter. They found his daughter, Sarah. She was being held in a rogue compound in the Western Territories. She's coming home. That's wonderful. Cassian's grip tightened. How many does that make now? 15. 15 children recovered out of the 23 who were taken. Ember's voice caught. The others were still searching, but some of them might be. Don't, Cassian said gently. Don't carry that weight alone. We're doing everything we can. Some wolves will save. Others will avenge. But you can't save them all, Ember. I know, but I have to try. It had become her mission, dismantling the trafficking networks that preyed on vulnerable wolves. With Reese's information and the captured rogues' testimonies, they'd identified operations in a dozen territories. Some they'd shut down completely. Others were still being investigated. It was dangerous work. Ember had survived 2 assassination attempts in the past month alone, traffickers desperate to protect their operations. But each time, Cassian and the King's Guard had been there, and each time, she'd gotten back up. Because giving up meant accepting that wolves like her childhood self, powerless, rejected, invisible, didn't matter. And Ember would die before accepting that. The council meeting, Cassian said, pulling her back to the present. Are you ready for the proposal? Ember took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. The council chamber was packed. Every alpha from the Northern Territories had assembled, along with their lunas, their betas, and their advisors. Representatives from other regions had come as well. Word of the Omega Luna's reforms had spread, and everyone wanted to see if she could actually pull off what she was attempting. A complete restructuring of pack hierarchy. Ember stood at the head of the chamber, Cassian beside her, and felt the weight of every gaze upon her. Skeptical gazes, hostile gazes, a few hopeful ones from wolves who'd suffered under the old system. Thank you all for coming, she began, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I know many of you have traveled far, and I appreciate your willingness to hear what I have to say. Get on with it, Alpha Marcus of the Ironwood Pack growled. Some of us have territories to run. Ember didn't flinch. Very well. For centuries, our packs have operated on a hierarchy that values physical strength above all else. Alphas at the top, betas in the middle, omegas at the bottom. This system has brought us stability, yes, but it has also brought us suffering. The strong survive, another alpha called out. That's the way of wolves, the way of nature. Is it? Ember challenged. Because nature also shows us that the most successful packs are those where every member contributes according to their strengths. Wolves hunt in coordinated groups, not as individuals. The pack survives because everyone from the strongest alpha to the smallest pup has a role to play. She gestured to the documents that had been distributed to every attendee. What I'm proposing isn't the elimination of hierarchy, it's the expansion of how we define strength. Physical dominance is one form of strength, but so is intelligence, creativity, empathy, the ability to nurture, to heal, to build. Arisepsex. You want us to value omegas the same as alphas? Someone scoffed. That's insane. I want you to value wolves based on their contributions, not their biology. Ember corrected. I want you to recognize that a healer who saves lives is as valuable as a warrior who takes them. That a teacher who shapes young minds is as important as a patrol leader who guards borders. That an omega who sees what others miss might prevent a tragedy that all your alpha strength couldn't stop. The chamber erupted in argument. Voices overlapped, some supportive, most resistant, all passionate. Cassian's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Enough. Silence fell instantly. You question my Luna's proposals, Cassian said, his dominance radiating through the room. But let me ask you this. How many of you have lost children to trafficking operations you didn't even know existed? How many of you ignored warning signs because they came from worthless omegas? How many of you are sitting here right now wondering if your pack has vulnerabilities you've never considered because you dismissed the wolves who tried to tell you? Uncomfortable silence. Ember didn't just survive an execution attempt, Cassian continued. She identified a trafficking ring that had been operating for 2 years under our noses. She saved 3 children that your traditional strength-based hierarchy had written off as acceptable losses. She has spent the past 3 months personally overseeing the recovery of 15 more children and the dismantling of operations across a dozen territories. He moved to stand beside Ember, his hand finding hers. So, when she tells you that our current system is broken, you listen. When she proposes reforms that make you uncomfortable, you consider them seriously. Because in 3 months, this worthless Omega has done more to protect your territories than some of you have done in decades. The silence that followed was different now. Thoughtful. Uncertain. Elder Moira rose slowly from her seat. The ancient wolf commanded respect across all territories, and every eye turned to her. I have lived through 8 decades, Moira said, her voice carrying despite its age. I have seen packs rise and fall. I have seen strong alphas lead their wolves to glory and to ruin. And I have seen the consequences of arrogance of believing that strength alone is enough. She looked directly at Ember. When this Omega came before us months ago, kneeling for execution, I said nothing. I let fear and tradition guide my silence, and I am ashamed of that. But since becoming Luna, she has shown us a different kind of strength. The strength to stand for the powerless when it would be easier to ignore them. The strength to challenge us when we need challenging. The strength to build, rather than just destroy. Moira's gaze swept across the assembled alphas. I support these reforms. Not because they are comfortable, but because they are necessary. Our world is changing. We can change with it, or we can cling to old ways until we become obsolete. I know which future I choose. Slowly, hesitantly, other voices joined hers. Not all of them, not even most, but enough. Enough to begin. The vote took hours. Debate raged as alphas argued points, proposed amendments, demanded clarifications. But by sunset, a framework had been established. Packs would be required to conduct annual reviews of their lower-ranking members' treatment. Omegas would have legal protections and the right to appeal unfair decisions. Resource distribution would be based on need and contribution, not just rank. And most importantly, a new position would be created in each pack, a voice for the voiceless, someone specifically tasked with ensuring vulnerable wolves were heard. It wasn't everything Ember had hoped for, but it was a beginning. As the council dispersed, wolves approached her one by one, some to congratulate, some to question specifics, and a precious few to thank her. My daughter is Omega, one Luna whispered, tears in her eyes. I've been terrified of what her life would become, but now there's hope. Thank you. My brother was killed trying to report pack corruption, a young beta said. No one listened to him because he was low-ranking. These reforms might have saved him. Thank you. Each gratitude was a small weight lifted from Ember's shoulders, and a new responsibility placed there. She was fighting not just for herself now, but for every wolf who'd been dismissed, ignored, abused. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. That night, Ember and Cassian stood on their balcony once more, the full moon rising behind them. You did it, Cassian said, pulling her close. You changed the world a little bit today. We changed it, Ember corrected. I couldn't have done any of this without you. Without your authority, your support, your unwavering belief that I was worth saving. You were always worth saving. I just helped you see it. Ember turned in his arms, her hands framing his face. I love you. I know I've said it before, but I need you to hear it again. I love you for seeing me when I was invisible, for standing beside me when it would have been easier to walk away, for believing I could be more than what they said I was. I love you too, Cassian replied, his voice rough with emotion. For showing me that strength comes in forms I'd never considered. For making me want to be better than I am. For giving me a purpose beyond just holding power. He kissed her then, deep and thorough, and the mate bond sang between them stronger now than ever, tempered by months of partnership and shared purpose. When they finally broke apart, Ember rested her head against his chest and said, There's something I need to tell you. What is it? I'm pregnant. Cassian went completely still. You're… what? Pregnant. About 6 weeks along, Lyra confirmed it this morning. Ember looked up at him, suddenly uncertain. I know we haven't talked about children yet, and with everything happening, the timing might not be. Cassian cut her off with a kiss that took her breath away. When he pulled back, his eyes were bright with unshed tears. "A pup," he whispered. "We're having a pup. Are you happy? Happy?" He laughed, the sound joyful and slightly unhinged. "Ember, I'm terrified and ecstatic, and already planning how to protect them from everything that could possibly go wrong. Yes, I'm happy. I'm beyond happy." He dropped to his knees, his hands gently cradling her still flat stomach. "Hello, little one. I'm your father, and you have the most extraordinary mother in the world. She's going to teach you to be strong and kind and brave. She's going to show you that worth isn't about power or rank or what others think of you. She's going to love you with a fierceness that will make the moon jealous." Ember's tears fell freely now. "And your father is going to protect you. Going to show you that true alphas lead with compassion as much as strength. He's going to make sure you grow up in a world that values who you are, not what you can do for others." Cassian stood and pulled her close again. "Omega, Alpha, or Beta, they'll be perfect, because they're ours." "Perfect," Ember agreed. Epilogue. 2 years later, Ember watched from the nursery window as Cassian played with their daughter in the garden below. Little Luna, named for her mother's title, and the moon that had witnessed her parents' mating giggled as her father chased her in his partially shifted form, letting her win their game of tag. At 18 months old, Luna was already showing signs of her wolf, a healthy, playful pup who didn't know yet what rank she'd be. And thanks to the reforms Ember had fought for, it wouldn't matter. She would be valued regardless. The nursery door opened, and Lyra entered carrying reports. The latest statistics from the territories. Missing persons reports are down 70% since the voice program started. Omega abuse cases have dropped by half. And we've recovered 8 more trafficking victims. 8 more, Ember repeated, her heart both heavy and light. That's 31 total. 31 children who get to come home. 31 families who have you to thank. Ember turned from the window. Not just me, all of us. Every wolf who decided that the old ways weren't good enough. Every alpha who chose compassion over tradition. Every omega who found the courage to speak up. She looked down at the Luna marks on her wrists. Silver lines that had once seemed impossible but now felt like they'd always belonged there. "I was a broken omega who knelt for execution," Ember said quietly. "And now I'm Luna. Now I'm a mother. Now I'm someone who fights for wolves who can't fight for themselves." She smiled. "If I can transform, anyone can. That's what I want our world to understand." Below, Cassian looked up and waved, his face bright with joy. Luna waved too, her tiny hand mimicking her father's gesture. Ember's chest tightened with love so fierce it hurt. She had survived the impossible, had been rejected, betrayed, sentenced to death, and had transformed it all into purpose. She wasn't broken anymore. She was whole, and she was exactly where she was meant to be. If Ember's journey moved you from rejected Omega kneeling for death to Luna changing the world, subscribe so you never miss stories about survivors who refuse to stay down. Stories like these deserve an audience that believes in second chances and the power of refusing to accept that anyone is disposable. Comment below. What would you change first if you had the power to reshape your world? Tell me your vision of justice. In the garden, Cassian caught his daughter and spun her around, her laughter echoing like music. In the nursery, Ember placed her hand over her stomach, where a second pup was just beginning to grow. In the territories, wolves who'd once been invisible were learning that they mattered. The world was changing. One reform at a time, one saved life at a time, one wolf at a time who learned that strength came in forms they'd never imagined. And at the center of it all was Ember Shadowborn, the broken Omega, who'd become a queen and was determined to make sure no one ever felt as alone and worthless as she once had. The moon rose over the northern territories, full and bright and eternal, and beneath its light, a new era was being born. Thank you for following Ember's journey from rejected Omega to Luna Queen. Her story reminds us that our worth isn't defined by those who can't see it, and that sometimes the wolves deemed broken are actually the strongest of all.